You fine, Lynette?
Ready to go.
Thank you, councillors. We'll open the meeting at 5:35. I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting and all of our visitors that may be online this evening. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the newly legislated state government requirements, the June Ordinary Council meeting will be undertaken as a virtual meeting conducted using webinar facilities. The council chambers will be closed to members of the public. All questions from the public must be submitted in writing prior to 1 o'clock on Tuesday the 16th of June 2020. A link to the council meeting for viewing by members of the public will be available via the council website. Recordings of council meetings or parts thereof cannot be copied, recorded, reproduced, reused or transmitted without the prior consent of the General Manager. Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri, Gundungurra and Darug people and respects the history and culture of the elders both past and present. Councillor Gibbons is still not online. There he is. Councillor Gibbons, are you happy to do the prayer this evening?
Thank you. Thank you, Lord, for your presence again tonight. You delight in the truth, openness and transparency. Please be our guidance tonight with our decision making and continue to remind us of our responsibilities in serving our people in the best possible way. Yesterday we acknowledged the great dedication of cleaners who go beyond the call of duty at this time. And we also thank you, Lord, for the wonderful season that the farmers and grazers are having this year. We place these prayers before you. Amen.
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 Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. Item 4, councillors, record of attendance. Councillor Brenda Lyon has applied for a leave of absence for health reasons. Can I have a mover and a seconder that Councillor Lyon's leave of absence be accepted? A mover, please. Councillor McCarthy, Councillor McKibben, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Page 5, councillors, item 5. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest here this evening? No declarations. Page 6. Item 6, there are no presentations this evening. Item 7, questions from the public. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the newly legislated state government requirements, the June Ordinary Council meeting is being undertaken as a virtual meeting conducted using webinar facilities. The General Manager has requested that all questions from the public be submitted in writing prior to 1 o'clock on Tuesday the 16th of June 2020. The General Manager will read out any questions submitted at this point in time. Questions will be taken on notice and a response provided within a reasonable time frame if questions cannot be answered this evening. Members of the public who submit a question to Council are permitted to do so, provided the following guidelines are adhered to. The person lodging the question must advise of their name and in what capacity they are acting. If the person lodging the question is acting as another person's or organisation's agent, they must advise Council if they have their prior consent or authority. Questions from the public is an opportunity for the community to put forward a question in relation to an issue or put a point of view relating to an issue that may be causing interest or concern. Due to time constraints, a time frame of 3 minutes per question is allowed or allocated. Can I ask the General Manager, were there any questions from the public today?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. There was 6 questions from the public and there was 1 late question that hasn't been included. However, we consider it as an operational query and we'll respond to that in due course. Of the 6, I will read out them in no particular order. The first one is from Philip Haynes. Read the refusal to answer questions. It is now obvious that you have no interest in what the residents of Oberon want. You have repeatedly refused to look into the fake/contrived SRC poll conducted to gauge the percentage of residents for or against fluoridation. The most accurate poll ever conducted in Oberon has 75% of the town against fluoridation. Even the Oberon Council's own correspondence showed 64% against fluoridation. So where are the 53% of residents who were supposedly for fluoridation claimed by the SRC poll? Obviously, they don't exist. As for Dr. Shanti's commitment to find out who is responsible for any health issues arising from fluoridation and get back to council, you refuse to follow up on her commitment. Why? Why would you refuse to follow up such an important question? Because of the fact that month after month you continue to say you've answered my questions when indeed you have not, I've decided this time to include your inadequate replies to my emails. In your 2 email replies to my questions regarding 1, the fake SRC poll, and 2, Dr. Shanti regarding the health issues of fluoride, you merely stated I should contact the state government or the SRC pollsters. What a joke. You know very well that would go nowhere, as if anyone would consider that a satisfactory answer from the mayor. Those who are not satisfactory areas from the mayor ought to care about the health and well-being of Oberon residents. So I'm saying it again, based on the inadequate answers you've given me so far, you have no interest in what the residents of Oberon want. I'll finish by asking all councillors to read the attached documents, which they have, because you're leaving yourself open to be sued if you fluoridate Oberon's water supply.
Thank you. And having responded to Mr. Haynes on 2 prior occasions, I have got nothing further to add on that topic.
Thank you. The second question is from Greg Evans on behalf of the OSR and RA. The General Manager and Corporate Services Director, Lynette Safranak, reports CCTV data will be made available directly for police accessing video footage from the police station or a mobile device in a secure cloud drive. Can the council please show cause that section 62(1) of the Privacy and Personal Information Protection Act 1998 are adhered to, and that this proposed change by the Corporate Services Director complies with the PPIP Act in terms of monitoring, evaluation and auditing of council's activities. OSR and RA support the rightful use of CCTV. Can the council please advise where the independent 12-monthly CCTV audits can be found for residents to view in accordance with the New South Wales Justice Department? And the second query is the General Manager and the Tech Services Director, Chris Schumacher's reports, the water consumption in week 22, 31st of May, increased by 40% compared to previous weeks. Did the incoming raw water burst pipe contribute to this? What caused the pipe and how long was the supply inoperable? Is there a connection in the wastewater treatment volume increasing in the same week by 100%? That is doubling.
Thank you, General Manager. You'll be taking that one on notice.
Happy to take a notice.
Thank you.
The third one is on behalf of the President of the OSR and RA, and the question relates to the Tech Services Director's reports for the O'Connell Ball is operational with the access remaining in a natural state until the rec ground designs have been done. In September 19, the Council advised 161 project having suffered an over expenditure of 101,000, with a further 80 required to complete the outstanding works, including security fencing and all-weather road access. Significant costs were incurred after approving 130,000 under Section 94 and 52,000 from works construction in October 19. Yet the project is still incomplete. The question is, what is the total cost year to date for this project? And 2, when will the original scope of work be completed? Councillors may wish to explore this topic further. 1403, community members would like to be informed given delays, cost overruns and short deliveries.
Thank you, the General Manager. As this is an operational issue, you'll be taking that on notice?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Now, the fourth query has come from Sig Sovic, and he is speaking on his own behalf. He indicates some background, and that background, the General Manager reports today that he's finalising the MOU for Borgs in relation to the Oberon Sports Complex. The Council claims that the matters dealt with in the MOU are confidential and only to be dealt with in closed session. There are only two parties to the negotiations. There is no commercial third party that possibly could be in a position to take advantage of any knowledge it may obtain from the negotiating process. The subject matter can only be relevant to Council and Borg, and importantly to the Oberon community. None of the conditions for confidentiality under the Local Government Act, section 10A, 2, C and D, can possibly apply. Concerns have been raised by the community about, one, the benefit of the community of the overall conception and the proposition being discussed between Borgs and Council. Two, the balance of the value of land and facilities to be given up and the value of the replacement assets being offered by Borgs. And three, the structure of the deal, which allegedly will make Council dependent on Borg for financial contribution to finalise the project at a future time where project overruns and other unforeseen risk factors may be difficult for Council to exercise its rights under the contract. Borg is by far the largest single employer in Oberon and is a major part of the community. Oberon does not have the luxury of a local industry with many large independent players. It is no secret that such a situation can be unbalanced and make commercial negotiations difficult. This also applies to any future contract disputes. It is all the more reason for Council to strengthen its hands and involve the Oberon community, the only other player in the issue, whose interests are vital and at stake. The questions for the Mayor. Does the Council intend to discuss in open Council or closed session the draft MOU before it is approved? If no Council discussions, why not? Two, if the answer to question one is in closed session, please let me know what the specifics are which will enable Council to claim confidentiality, and also under which subsection of the Local Government Act it's claimed. Also, please explain why Council believes its reason override the community's strong right to know. There are legal precedents in this area, as I understand it. Three, in any event, to make formal request here, I make formal request here that Council make public the draft MOU private to it being signed with Borgs. I ask the Mayor to confirm that the motion will be brought forward so that the Council in session will formally be able to consider releasing the draft prior to signing the document.
Thank you. Items that are deemed confidential under the Act are classified as such by the General Manager and in accordance with the Act. I defer these questions to the General Manager for a response, and this will be taken now on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. The fifth question comes from Veronica Statanovich, and she acts on her own volition. I would like to see the low bridge on Oberon Street on the east side of town between the Trout Motel and the RSL be made safe. I've been in council meetings over the years where this bridge has been mentioned of its need of being made safe. It is clearly not wide enough to accommodate traffic safely, as well as the fact the road bends at the bridge adds to the dangerous nature of this bridge. In inclement weather, it is even more dangerous, which I've experienced firsthand. In addition to the road bridge on Edith Road towards Genoa Caves needs to be widened. I've travelled this bridge every time I go to town, and although it is designated a two-way bridge, it really shouldn't be. There have been several occasions where I've pulled over to allow large semi-trailers to pass, as there is barely a millimetre gap if we occupy the bridge together. The reason why I'd like to see both these bridges remedied is that as council pushes on with its campaign to increase tourism in the area, these infrastructure issues only get more pressing. Just think if a tragedy happened and a tourist was involved on one of these bridges and how that would impact on the reputation of the town. It's fine having lots of sporting venues and halls, but what about the suffering of basic infrastructure?
Okay, I'd like to thank Veronica for her comment and note that there has been some work done around these issues. Council will take this on notice and provide a response.
Thank you. The final question comes from Hardy Draham. Madam Mayor, I'm asking as a resident of Oberon. The draft suite of plans deserves various questions regarding more detailed studies. After changes to accounting standards in 1920, it is not clear to me the documents presented. From now on, future income is declared when the project is finished, not when the funds are received. AASB 15 Note 3. Where grant income arises from an agreement which is enforceable and contains sufficient specific performance obligations, then the revenue is recognised when control of each performance obligation is satisfied. The income statement shows the council expects CAPEX grants in the order of 9.4 million, 8.7 extra compared to 1920. 1. Is it correct the council anticipates all 9.4 worth of projects to be finished in 2021? If the answer is in the affirmative, does the 2021 operating plan comply with AASB 15 intentions? 3. Would a new set of plans have to be prepared for the public to review and comment should this figure of 9.4 not be compliant with AASB 15? 4. Other expenses have increased by over $1 million. What cost-saving measures has this council identified? Evidently, a 50% cost increase is outrageous after COVID. 5. Please provide a breakdown of materials and contracts, employee benefits and borrowing costs akin to other expenses to make the plan figures transparent. Why are the borrowings cost $123,406 the same in 2 years, and what are they for?
Thank you, General Manager. I'll refer this to the General Manager and I assume you will take this one on notice.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. That's all the letters from the public this evening, councillors. We now go to page 6, confirmation of minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 9th of May 2020 be confirmed. Can I have someone to move that way, please? Councillor McKechnie, thank you. Councillor McKibben, thank you. Any business arising? Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on, I think it's page 15, the amendment that was made to the second quarter budget review statement, where it was, which states, and it's about 1/5 of the way down the page. It was noted that the following sentence in the report be meant to say Q3 has seen council make headways. That should be headway, not headways.
Thank you, councillor. We'll get that amended. Any other business arising, councillors? Not, I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Item 9, mayoral minute and report. There's a recommendation, councillors, that report item 0901 is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Doney and Councillor McKibben. Councillor Doney. Sorry.
We unmute ourselves, do we?
No, you're unmuted, councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Another busy workload for yourself. I'm just wondering about page 7, correspondence. 13th of May. This National Pastoral Conservation Manager, could you just familiarise myself with who this is and who they represent?
Mr. Goff is employed by the government, and he is looking at councils across the state as far as farming and land management is concerned. This was a generic letter to all councils. It had little impact actually on Oberon, and I'm happy to forward that to you.
Would you do so? Just
Yes, I will. Yep.
And I think the others have been covered, so I'm fine with that. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I too was going to ask about the second item on the 13th of May from Jack Goff, so I would be interested in obtaining a copy of that letter too, if I could.
Yep.
Maybe other councillors might be as well.
Oh.
I think the item above it about the Country Link bus service from Oberon, when is that actually going to start?
He's
When
already
is the change
started.
going to
It's already
right?
started, Councillor.
Fine. And that's meeting the original bullet, not the follow-on bullet, I'm assuming?
It's the second bullet.
Oh, it's the second bullet, not the first bullet.
No.
Right. The item at the bottom, the Local Government New South Wales media release, was that one that was circulated? I can't remember it.
Yes, it was circulated. All councillors should have got it. It's around infrastructure, and it's got a whole lot of things in it that the government would like to have a finger in a pie of. You should have already got this letter, everybody. I'm happy to recirculate it again if you'd like to. The actual term power grab is one that comes from Local Government New South Wales.
I'll search my intro, and if I can't find it,
I'm
Madam
happy
Mayor,
to send it.
I'll get it. And I take it, Madam Mayor, on page 9, there's a couple of issues about roadside vegetation, one from Brian Harmon and one from Don Fitzpatrick. They were about roadside vegetation encroaching on the roads, I'm assuming.
Yes, Mr. Fitzpatrick had an issue with some vegetation on the side of his road as a result of trees falling down, and Mr. Harmon has some concerns about the road out to Jenolan Caves, the vegetation's growing up and hiding animals and shading the road. So both have been passed to the Director for direct comment, and I believe Mr. Fitzpatrick's issue has been solved and he's quite happy.
I think that says it later down on the 3rd of June. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor, on page 9, on the 27th of May, towards the top of the page, the correspondence with the member Melinda Favey in regard to the Fish River water supply. I'm just wondering whether that was in relation to our request for a pipeline or our push for a pipeline from Duck Malloy to Oberon Dam.
No, not directly, it wasn't. It was more to do with the Bathurst application to draw some water down the Fish River.
And
it's not happening.
There was no discussion about the Duck Malloy?
We have had discussions with Minister Pavey about the Duck Malloy, and she has committed to have a look at that, but that particular piece of correspondence wasn't concerning that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else, councillors? Councillor Gibbons.
Correspondence, page 8. On the 19th of May and the 27th of May, correspondence from Greg McGuinness about overtaking lands on the Duck Malloy Road. Is he just a farmer, or is someone that has some authority? We've been through this with the RMS. I just was wondering what the comments were there.
The RMS has committed to coming back to Mr. McGuinness at a later date. They're going to review the situation and come back to him. I'm happy to forward that correspondence to you, Councillor.
Thank you. The other one was covered by Councillor McKechnie, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 11, councillors, notices of motion. There are none this evening. Item 11, councillor and delegates reports. Item 11.01, Arts Out West Annual General Meeting. There's a recommendation there that report is received for information. Can I have someone to move that, please? Councillors, Councillor McKibben and Councillor Capel, thank you. Councillor McKibben. Councillor McKibben.
Seems to
Thank
speak
you.
for itself. The report seems to speak for itself, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Hello? Yep.
Councillor Capel.
I think I'm going now. Am I? Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No. After all that, nothing further to add. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Any other comments on this one, councillors? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Page 12, committee reports, item 12.01, Local Emergency Management Committee. There's a recommendation that the minutes of the Local Emergency Management Committee meeting held on the 11th of May 2020 are received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McCarthy and Councillor McKibben. Thank you. Councillor McCarthy. Just a moment, Councillor McCarthy. Could you start again, Councillor McCarthy? You weren't unmuted.
Sorry, was there
Yep.
113 people tested?
Sorry, councillor.
Was there 113 people tested on the site in Tully's Lane?
No, there was more than that, I'm sure.
Okay, did they understand that they were supposed to go home? Most of them went shopping up at Morwood's and the news agency, to the butchers.
They were certainly given instructions they had to self-isolate for 48 hours, councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I've got no further comments. The report speaks for itself with the attached minutes.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Page 15, councillors, item 13.01, reports for decision, investment policy 2211 review. There is a recommendation there, councillors, but the Director of Corporate Services has asked if she could give a brief overview before I call for a remover of that recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to confirm that what the aim of this policy was, while staff were continuing to abide by Local Government Act and the Code of Accounting Practice and Financial Reporting and Investment Policy guidelines, we wanted to ensure that with limited risk, we were diversifying our investments, protecting council's capital, as well as continuing to support community-based institutions within our region. In these times, local government cannot be seen to be pulling away from local-based institutions. Local government is not commercially based, and yes, some of us would like that to happen, but councils would be moving away from their core identity, which is supporting the community. This policy proposes that all investments made by staff have the government 250,000 guarantee, and with institutions with substantial asset base.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, councillors, I've got a recommendation there that council adopt option 2, investment policy 2211. Do I have someone to move that, please? Do I have someone to move that, councillors? Councillor Capel and Councillor McKellum. Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have read both of these, read the recommendation, and I've read both of the number 1 policy and the number 2 policy. I will go. I'm happy to be guided by the recommendation that council adopt option 2. I know that there'll be a fair bit of discussion about it, and I'll follow the discussion closely.
Thank you, Councillor Capel. Councillor Kellam.
Thank you. I too am happy with option 2. And that's just the intent of our discussions 2 months ago.
I'm sorry, Councillor, you're breaking up.
I have a couple of concerns for both. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. I will come closer to the microphone, see if that helps. I have concerns that both options limit to varying degrees diversification of investments, which in any investment climate is important. There are very few, if any, AAA rated investment opportunities in Australia. All 4 major banks are AA minus at the moment. So there is limits to how much where we can invest. I agree we need to invest locally, and we do that through the Family First Building Society. And although it's not an Oberon building society, it is in the Central West area.
You're not coming through at all, Councillor.
Option 2 provides allows us to minimise our risk.
I'm sorry, Councillor, that was very fragmented. We didn't really get the gist of what you were saying. I'm not sure why that is.
Okay, Madam Mayor, what I might do is leave the meeting and rejoin it using my iPad, because I'm getting a serious delay on video as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKibben. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had to wait to be unmuted, sorry. Following the previous meeting, or the April meeting, I was asked to do the reasons behind the resolution that was made at that meeting. And I did an extensive report with analysis of some of the institutions, as well as why we should be investing with the 5 banks. That has been circulated to all councillors and went to the auditors, and the auditors have obviously commented. I have asked of the Director of Corporate Services Director, to provide, for Mr. Burgett, one of the auditors, the independent member, to provide some comments on that. I've also asked the analysis of all of the BBB plus or less rated institutions in which we invest. I haven't received a response to either of those. I did actually look at some of the institutions we looked at, and I didn't think they actually were substantive enough to invest in. And I could find little information on a number of them. They were on pages 2, 3, and 4 of the document that I was requested to do. I believe the recommendation should be to adopt option 1, and I'd be proposing an amendment to the recommendation to state that. I think my document speaks highly. It shows that the major banks have been through an amazing amount of stress tests since the global financial crisis, and that those banks, yes, they have 75% of the banking assets of Australians with them. Now, I understand that obviously we need to support our local institutions, but we are in difficult times, and we really don't know what the outflow of this COVID-19 situation is. We are sitting here, and Australia is probably looking better than anywhere else at the moment, but really we don't know what businesses are going to fail. I mean, I've noticed a number of cafes, restaurants, chocolate shops have just shut up shop since COVID-19. And I think we won't know the real impact until we hit September to December this year and into the new year. If council decides to adopt option 2, so be it. I say our investment policy is preservation of capital, our number one aim. If number one is the aim, then I've put the reasoning for that in the lengthy document that I've done. It has been, as I understand it, supported by both the CTA ARIC Chair, Neil Maltby, and Philip Burgett, the ARIC independent member. As I said, I've asked for clarifications through the Director of Corporate Services from some of Mr. Burgett's comments. I haven't received those. I also asked, when I provided this lengthy details, as to what analysis council had done at all of these institutions. Again, I have received nothing. I assume nothing was looked into independently by council into these institutions that are rated BBB+ or less or have no ratings. Therefore, my position is we should be adopting option 1.
So are you raising an amendment, councillor, to that effect?
I am, Madam Mayor. I'm raising an amendment that the recommendation should be that council adopt option 1 - investment policy 2211.
Do we have a seconder, councillors? Councillor McKechnie, thank you. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor McKechnie? Councillor McKibben has just spoken to it.
Yes, Madam Mayor, if I could. At the previous meeting, as Councillor McKibben alluded, we discussed this in detail, and my position then was that we should be very conservative in our investment policy and do our best to preserve our capital. Councillor McKibben's further analysis and the comments in the report from the 2 auditors, the independent auditor and the council audit, back those findings of Councillor McKibben's report. And I think based on that, we should support the recommendation and vote for the amendment. I'll be voting for the amendment.
Thank you, councillor. Is there any other comment on the amendment, councillors? Councillor Doney. Councillor Doney, could you unmute Councillor Doney, please? Councillor Doney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just first up, point of information. I'm looking at my business papers here, and on page 21, I have one in a rank of figures with adjustments in red. And then on page 28, I have virtually the same copy of the same report with the different figures on it. No
one is option 1, councillor, and one is option 2.
That's what I was assuming. Okay. Thank you. But there was no titles or something to clarify that for me. I supported Councillor McKibben's original impetus for very conservative or conservative management. I thought that was sensible. I also think the comments made by one of the respondents that there is some sense of a community social obligation to support local businesses, and that financial institutions are going to be downgraded. That in fact we are not, we are going to be struggling to find, if at all, AAA rated institutions to invest in. Now, if we go with option 2, for example, that leaves us exposed really, and if I can get this clarified, for the $1 million. Everything else would be subject to the Australian government guarantee, or would the very least of those, the unrated, still be subject to the Australian government $250,000 guarantee? Can I get an answer on that? If any of those investments are not protected?
All of the investments are protected by the government guarantee. And I will just add that when you are looking at the government guarantee of $250,000, that's per institution, not per investment. So if you have 3 investments with, say, AMP, and it went belly up, you would get 250,000. You wouldn't get 250,000 on each of your investments. And even though you may have institutions there that are unrated, they are definitely still covered by the guarantee.
So if you had, in that $1 million category, if you had 4 investments in local institutions to the value of $250,000, they would still be protected by that guarantee.
As long as they're all protected, but if you've got it in 4 different institutions, the whole million is protected. If you've got it in one, you only get 250,000 is all that's protected. And I'll go to the director to ensure that that's correct.
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I do support this, the conservative approach, but I do have sympathy with supporting local institutions in the sense that that can, really cascade local problems. So I have a little bit of a tendency to let this morph into option 2. I'd like to hear a little bit more discussion about it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kellam.
Madam Mayor, I've switched devices, so hopefully the audio is somewhat better.
Yep.
The difference between option 1 and option 2 is varying degrees of conservatism. At the moment, both policies do limit our ability to diversify our investments because there are very few, in fact, there are no major financial institutions in Australia that are currently rated as AAA. So we have got a very small pond to work in. The major banks are all AA minus at the moment. The difference in the 2 policies in terms of conservatism is simply the unrated versions. And the ARIC made that comment and made a number of other comments which tended to push my view towards option 2. It is still substantially the same risk profile, except for the very bottom of that table. And I think that is, considering the size of the investment and our ability to diversify, that's probably not a terrible risk to have.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, councillors, on the amendment? Councillor Doney again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Kellam, that's why I addressed that bottom line in particular. Well, I don't think we need a further amendment, but are we satisfied that staff would be directed to spread any investments in local financial institutions such that they would all be covered, the total value, by the 250,000 guarantee?
Go to the director.
Or the general manager.
Or through the general manager. Through the director.
Madam Mayor, we try always to spread our investments, especially with the local institutions. We normally only have 2 investments at any one time. Would be maximum of 3 that we would have, but it's normally we try and have 2 in a local institution, which would be a maximum, at the current time, is a maximum of $1 million.
Councillor Doney. Madam
Mayor, can I get clarification on that? Is that 2 to 3 in 2 to 3 different institutions, or are there not enough sound institutions for us to make that choice? Do we have all those in one institution or in 3 institutions?
We normally do have them at 2 institutions. At the current time, we do have them both in 1 institution, but that is because one of the others matured and there was a better interest rate with the Family First Credit Union, but normally we do try and do 2 institutions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd also like to ask the Director of Corporate Services. I don't believe I received a response from the Auditor Burgett, even though I was advised, and I was also advised that the analysis of council of these institutions that are rated less than BBB plus would be provided. I don't think I received that email today, but I may have missed it. That's my first point. The second point is, and I would like a response to that. The second point is, I did have a look at some of these institutions. I'm not as optimistic as some of the other people might be on, for instance, the Australian Unity Bank, B&K Banking Group, GNC Mutual, Bank Vic, which was previously the Police Association Credit Cooperative. None of these I can find very much information on. So, although we may be limiting our exposure to these to 500,000, it still puts $250,000 with those institutions at risk, and they haven't had the stress tests or the degree of rigour that the major 5 banks have had over the past 6 years. And I concede that certain of the other institutions, such as the Bank of Queensland and the AMP Bank, may be relatively safe. But I'm certainly not convinced that some of the others, in particular because a lot of their loans are not diversified in themselves. They are to a particular client base. They have been credit unions, or they've been industry trade union associations or industry associations. So, you know, they haven't got the diversity of exposure that the large major banks have. I mean, the major banks in this company have been through huge stress tests, huge insight, the Royal Banking, the Royal Commission into the banks, etc. The government is not going to let any of them fail, and that is acknowledged by, I think, Mr. Burgett. So, although we all would like to support community organisations, I'm just not satisfied in the current circumstances, and as I said, we don't know where we're going to be in September, December or early next year, that these are actually financially secure. You know, enough. The Judo Bank, it was developed to support SMEs. We do not know how many SMEs are going to go to the wall, for instance, that's small and medium enterprises. I'm the first to say we should try to support these people, but if our number one aim, and I think it is because we've been caught before Oberon Council, is preservation of capital, we have to look at the Conservative avenue. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I am speaking against the amendment. I am favouring option 2 for the reasons that both of these options are so similar, apart from the unrated, the 1 million in unrated. But I do note that I do note the comments that we should be supporting our regional institutions. I don't regard Judo Bank and others mentioned by Councillor McKibben as regional or local organisations. I think that covers our credit unions and our local banks. I think to put all of our eggs in one basket, considering we only will get, should the banks fail, 250,000 per bank, not per investment, we're putting slightly at risk our capital. Ratings, as you will note from Mr. Burgett and Mr. Maltby, are only a guide. There's no guarantees with ratings. I'm absolutely in favour of option 2. So Councillor Capel, would you like, or Councillor McKibben, would you like a right of reply? Before I put
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note, and I'm quite prepared to amend either option 1 or 2. I note the director's comments when this originally came up in April about the 250,000 limit and needing 500,000 to invest. But I also note, and I did seek clarification on the CTA independent member, Mr. Burgett's comments at the top of page 16. It is a suggestion by him that we should be limiting, as I understand, unrated institutions up to 250,000 and no more, as long as they've got an ADI. That's the Australian government's guarantee. So whichever option we put up, I would be stating if they're unrated, that the limit be 200, unrated, and they have an ADI, it should be limit of 250,000. And that is, I think, what is being suggested. I have sought clarification on this, but I haven't received it back. And I haven't had a response from the director on either of the questions I asked, please. I think that he's suggesting at the top of page 16 that that's what we should be doing, and I'd concur with that. If we go either option 1 or option 2.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kellam. You're not muted yet, Councillor Kellam. Unmuted. Can we unmute Councillor Kellam?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with that particular amendment. The fact that we may not get as good an interest rate with $250,000 is not a problem. That is consistent with the basic principle of preservation of capital. And it also provides an avenue for very safe diversification. So I'm perfectly happy with what Councillor McKibben has proposed there.
That's not what I have in the amendment. What I have in the amendment is that council adopt option 1, and I haven't got it in front of me, so I can't read what the amendment actually is. Could I have it up, Sharon, please? Can I have that up, Sharon, or not? No, okay. So,
Madam Mayor,
sorry.
the simple amendment that we're dealing with here is that council adopt option 1 as the investments policy rather than option 2. So
yes, I know the premise. I know the premise. So the wording is that council adopt option 1 of investment policy 221. Am I correct? Okay, so the amendment is that council adopt option 1 investment policy 221. All in favour? Sorry, I can't see the screen. 1, 2, 3, 3. Against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Hang on, I'm missing. I can't see the 5th, I'm sorry.
Councillor Capel.
Councillor Doney, Councillor Kellam, Councillor Sajewicz, Councillor Capel, Councillor McCarthy. Sorry, and I still can't see it, sorry. Councillor Doney, Councillor Kellam, Councillor Sajewicz, Councillor Capel, Councillor McCarthy. 5. Thank you. So the amendment is defeated. We go back to the original motion that council adopt option 2 investment policy 221. The proposer of that recommendation was Councillor Capel. Councillor Capel, do you wish to speak further on this? Councillor Kellam, do you wish to speak further on this as a seconder?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to propose an amendment, and that is that we adopt option 2, but we limit the unrated investments to 250,000 per institution.
Limit the investment to 250,000 per institution.
Per institution.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor McKibben. I'd like to speak to that amendment, Councillor Callum.
Madam Mayor, as we discussed just a few minutes ago, that limits our risk and provides another level of diversity which was not apparent in option 1, but it does so with a government-backed guarantee of $250,000. It does limit our ability to command the best interest rate, but that is not important in terms of the basic tenet of preservation of capital.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I obviously agree with the amendment because I spoke to it previously. I just asked, as I said, I am still concerned about some of the scope of the investments. Can I please have a response from the Director of Corporate Services to what analysis of these institutions we've done? I've asked the question 3 times and I haven't had a response.
Thank you, Councillor. To the Director.
And the response from the Auditor Budget. But the first thing is, I was told there was an analysis done of these institutions. I haven't received it. I've asked twice.
Thank you. Through the General Manager to the Director to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first response is regarding Philip, the independent auditor's comments. He has provided comments which are included in the report and is not prepared to provide any other advice or comments. What he has in the report is his full response. The second question you are asking me is you have asked for an analysis of the institutions. It was my understanding that that was put together. Unfortunately, we have had some sick leave with staff, and I know that it's no excuse, but I will have that to you today. There has been an analysis done on each of the institutions, and I have quite a long list. I just want to verify it all before I send it. I don't want to send you half an analysis.
Thank you to the Director. Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor, just on the amendment, the wording that proposed by Councillor Kellam, should we include only the unrated institutions that have a government guarantee in that wording?
Yes, I think that we should probably, when in hindsight. Councillor Kellam.
I'm happy with that amendment.
So the wording of the amendment will now be, Councillor, that Council adopt option 2 to limit the investment to $250,000 per institution on unrated institutions. You happy with that?
With a Australian government deposit guarantee.
Yeah, with an Australian government guarantee. They can be unrated and still have the guarantee, still have the ADI.
Yep.
It's an authorised deposit, that they are an authorised deposit institution, is the wording.
Okay. Is
Under
there any other
Australian
comment?
government legislation.
Is there other comment, councillors, before I call up the amendment to the screen? Councillor Doney.
Just clarifying, Madam Mayor, the option 2 also states that investments should be for amounts no greater than $500,000. Are we retaining that phrase?
Option 2.
On page 28 of the business papers, describing option 2.
Well, if we adopt option 2, that
part of it.
in option 2 will be what we adopt. Is that, or am I misunderstanding you, Councillor?
Well, we've adjusted the second part of the material in red, where we're saying unrated institutions that are authorised ADIs. We're limiting our investment to 250,000 in each one. But does that mean we are still holding the first phrase that means in all other institutions is our maximum investment 500,000?
No,
that's all the other investments.
I don't believe that's the
I
case.
just want that clarified before we vote.
Okay, I'll go to through the General Manager to the Director.
Madam Mayor, I understand you wanting to restrict the investments in ADI unrated to 250,000, and that's fine. I would recommend against reducing the amount of the AAA down to BBB any lower than 500,000.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want it clarified so we know what we're voting on.
Thank you, Councillor. So who are we with now? McKechnie, Councillor Doney. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wonder, as I've said, my analysis of some of these institutions was a bit, I wouldn't be satisfied investing in some of them in the current climate. But we're limiting ourselves now to 500,000 for each of, say, the 4 major banks and Bank of Queensland and AMP. I really think for those sorts of...
That's for investment, Councillor?
I don't know if it's per investment or per institution. I don't know how to read it. It could be read per institution. I think it's too because it doesn't matter. I mean, it seems to me it's meant to mean per institution because of the 250,000 guarantee. So my concern is that it actually maybe we've got $17 million. We're going to have difficulties with the limits we've placed on maximums and with trying to put the majority in at least relatively safe institutions with a 500,000 limit. This is part of my problem why we increased at the April meeting the limits. So say for instance, we wanted to put, and we've got 17 million, $2 million with the NAB. We can't do it, I don't believe. Say we wanted to put $1 million with Westpac. I don't believe we can do it if we adopt this one. I think the 500,000 was sort of related to, because the Director of Corporate Services said originally, we need at least 500,000 to invest in an institution to get a reasonable interest rate. Now, I can understand, that concept. But I believe with our safer institutions that we shouldn't be limiting ourselves to 500,000. And I think that the maximum limits should maybe increase somewhat. I'm also interested that when this analysis has come out, that we look at it, and it may very well be that it's considered that some of these institutions are really not acceptable. I think we will find that we have been investing in. So I'm not sure how we're going to make that, even though they're rated, how we're going to make that determination. So I've got 2 problems. The first is, I don't think we've got a high enough limit for where we're actually investing in our safer institutions. Number two is we don't know what this analysis is going to come out with. And as I said, I've done some analysis. I think we're going to find it difficult to get some financial information out of these, about some of these bodies. And if we can't get the enough financial information that's satisfactory, what do we do? Because I assume we haven't really done this analysis previously when we did invest in these institutions. I don't know. So I think we've got a few problems that we really, the way this option 2 is framed is not coping with.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other comment before I bring this up on the screen? Councillor Kellam. You're not unmuted yet, Councillor Kellam. Thank you. Councillor Kellam.
I think there's some merit in what Councillor McKibben is saying, but the same problem applies to option 1 as well. There are no AA, AAA or AA plus institutions on the list that we currently have. They are all AA minus or below. So the 6 million that's allocated to AAA institutions and the 5 million that is allocated to AA institutions in option 1, it doesn't work. There is the A and triple B plus is fine, but that's really where most of the institutions we're operating with at the moment do their business. So really what the maximum limit is per investment rather than per institution. And that would make it workable.
Okay. Can we have this amendment up on the screen, councillors, to see what we're actually arguing here? Well, not arguing, what we're discussing here. Sharon, could I have the amendment up on the screen, please? I'll come back to you, Councillor McKibben. That Council adopt option 2, investment policy 221, and that the policy be amended to state that investments in ADI unrated institutions should be with an Australian government guarantee and limited to 250,000 per investment. Now, Councillor Kellam, this is your amendment. We can't hear you, Councillor. Councillor, can we unmute Councillor Kellam because we can't hear, please?
There we go.
Councillor Kellam, I'm sorry to ask you to start again.
That's okay. I suggest we add another sentence to that amendment, and that is for other than the unrated institutions, the maximum limit is for per investment, not per institution.
Did you get that, Sharon?
That makes it all work.
I'll come back to you, Councillor McKibben. Can you put that up on the screen, please, Sharon, when you're ready for Councillor Kellam to look at? Council adopt option 2, investment policy 221, and that the policy be amended to state that investments in ADI unrated institutions should be with an Australian government guarantee and are limited to 250,000 per investment. Other than the unrated institutions, the maximum amount is per investment, not per institution. Is that your amendment, Councillor Kellam?
Hang on. And after 250,000 per investment and per unrated institution. And per institution. Yeah. No, leave that last sentence in, Sharon. I think that's what we're after.
Can you all read that, councillors? Councillor McKibben.
I think the wording's a bit convoluted at the moment in that we're talking about ADI, which is the Australian government guarantee. So I haven't got the wording up. But can I, before we get to the changing the wording to actually make it make sense, I just want to put a scenario up. Why, if we're investing in Westpac, which let's say has a rating higher than BBB plus, if we're limited under the maximum M to 2 million, why should we then have to make four investments of 500,000 each, which will probably earn us a lower interest rate than if we were put 2 million in one investment? We have no better guarantee because it's 250,000 per institution. So whether we make 4 investments of 500,000 or one of 2 million, we'll probably get a higher interest rate on 2 million. We have no better guarantee because it's only 250,000 per guarantee per institution. So we're nearly not helping ourselves here. Similarly, you know, I'm wondering whether we should increase the BB plus maximum amount. So if we were to invest 2 million in Westpac, 2 million in NAB, 2 million ANZ, 2 million CBA and 2 million in Macquarie, we get 10 million. So $7 million of our money is being invested in institutions of BBB plus or less. Are we as a council happy about that? I would be happy if I knew it was, say, going to Bank of Queensland, AMP Bank. I'm not sure that I'd be particularly happy if we were investing 1.5 million with, say, let me see.
Mayor, could I respond?
Yeah. Etc.
I think at some point in time here, we have to have some faith in our staff.
Madam Mayor, if I could please, Andrew, Councillor McKibben, the reason that we normally do maximum 500,000 investments, very occasionally we do $1 million ones, but we do this for cash flow purposes. So we have to remember that this investment money isn't there for, you know, an extended time. It is there for operational cash flow purposes. It needs to come in and out on a regular basis. So that is why we do the 500,000. So, and on a short term rather than, you know, 5 years or 12 months, 18 months or longer, but for a cash flow purpose.
Okay, councillors, I'm going to now put this recommendation. I think we've given this a fairly good go. I think we need to put this amendment up on the screen. We need to vote on this amendment, please.
Madam Mayor, the wording is not correct.
Well, that's why I'm bringing it on the screen, councillor. Okay, so what we've got written here for the amendment is that council adopt option 2, investment policy 221, and that the policy be amended to state that investments in ADI unrated institutions should be with an Australian government guarantee and limited to $250,000 per investment and per institution. Further, it is noted that other than the unrated institution, the maximum amount is per investment, not per institution. Now, Councillor Kellam, this is your amendment that you're putting. Are you happy with this wording, or would you like it to change to reflect discussion since it came up? Councillor Kellam?
All right. It's a little bit of ambiguity I'll remove now. Investments in ADI unrated institutions should be limited to 250,000 because with an Australian government guarantee is already inclusive of the term ADI.
Yeah.
per institution after 250,000.
Just leave the final words in, per institution.
Yep.
You happy with that, councillor?
I'm happy with that, Madam Mayor.
As the seconder, councillor McKibben, are you happy with that?
I'm happy with that,
Thank you, councillor.
Madam Mayor. I'm still concerned, I have to say, about the 7 million that could be invested in less than B plus and the scope there. But anyway,
Thank you, councillors.
yes, I'm happy.
Thank you. I'm going now to put that recommendation, councillors. All in favour? Councillor McCarthy? Against? Councillor McCarthy Councillor McKechnie, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Against? Can I have Councillor McKechnie unmuted, please?
Yeah, I voted for it.
Thank you. So the amendment is now carried, councillors, and the amendment now becomes the motion. Sorry, Sharon, I'll have to ask you to bring that back up again so I get it exact. Bear with us, councillors. It's a bit difficult with this when you're doing this on screen. So the motion is now that council adopt option 2, investment policy 221, and that the policy be amended to state, no, that's not it, council, that's not it, Sharon, that you've got highlighted. That council adopt option 2, investment policy 221, and that the policy be amended to state that investments in ADI unrated institutions should be limited to $250,000 per institution. Further, it be noted that other than the unrated institutions, the maximum amount is per investment and not per institution. That now becomes the motion. All in favour, councillors? Sorry, I can't see the screen. Against, councillors? The motion's carried. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, I can't hear you, councillor. Sorry, I can't hear. Can I have Councillor McCallum, Councillor McCallum?
Madam Mayor, I need to go offline for a brief time to rectify a test issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, councillors, we're on page 32. Item 1302. The draft 2020-21 integrated planning and reporting. We've lost Sharon as well.
Madam Mayor, if I could, I think the director would like to just do a clarification in relation to one of the dot points within recommendation 1. And I'll ask Lynette to provide that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I would like to put a clarification in there for recommendation 2, F, G, H and I regarding the town improvement levy, to add to the end of each of those points that so if, for example, the number F will read that a town improvement levy of 0.0061550099 cents on all rateable land categorised business in accordance with section 518 of the Act, in accordance with section 5292D of the Act, within the Oberon Township Zone.
Within the Oberon Township Zone.
Correct. It is in the report, but that clarifies it in the recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, we've got a recommendation there in 11 parts, Is there a mover that will remove all 11 parts? I'm happy to read out the whole 11 parts if required. Please raise a hand if you want me to read out the whole 11 parts. Councillor McKibben? Okay, the recommendation is that Council adopts draft 2020-20.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I would like each one, the recommendations voted on separately. I don't need you to read them all out.
Okay, then you need to move an alternate recommendation, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, I would suggest that each of the recommendations be treated as separate recommendations and voted on accordingly, 1 to 11.
Is there a seconder, councillors? Councillor McCarthy, thank you. Anyone not in favour of that, councillor? Anyone wants to speak against that? Then I'm going to put that recommendation all in favour. Carried, thank you. The recommendation is, I will go through them one at a time. Part 1, that Council adopts the draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan at attachment 1 and resolves to publicly exhibit the plan for 28 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. Submissions received during the public exhibition period will be considered and presented to the July Ordinary Council meeting prior to final adoption. Can I have someone to move that, please, councillors? Councillor Capel, do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder, councillors? Councillor McCarthy, thank you. I wish to speak to number 1, Councillor Capel. Can we unmute Councillor Capel? Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very straightforward. We put the we adopt the operational plan and we put it on public display. And then when, if there's any further submissions, we deal with them in July. Straightforward, easy.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Capel.
You agree with Councillor Capel?
Yes.
Any other comments on recommendation 1, councillors? Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be proposing an amendment. The amendment would be to adopt the draft operational plan and long-term financial plan attachment 1 with the following substantive changes. A, that council not increase rates by the rate peg for 2020-21. 2, that councillors not accept an increase in remuneration for 2020-21. 3, that the General Manager be directed to find cost savings equivalent to 1.33% of expenditure across the council in areas excluding roads. That is my proposed amendment, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment, councillors? Councillor McKibben. Councillor McKechnie, I'm sorry. I'd like to speak to this, Councillor McKibben, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think a lot of our ratepayers are really are having rate problems, and the rates have significantly increased with obviously the SRV, which with a compounding effect, I stick to my position despite the comment on page, wherever it is, top of page 40. Compounding, it's been a 39% increase without the current Valuer General's increases, which has substantially affected a lot of ratepayers within this council area. I think council has to be serious in trying to reduce the pain. I'm suggesting that we do not increase the rates by the rate peg. I understand that as a councillors, we are probably on the lower end of the scale for payment. But I think if we're going to do this, we have to show an example. And that is not ask for an increase ourselves. I also think that there are cost savings that can be made. And I have confirmed by the Director of Corporate Services that the 166,000, which we are looking at as a deficit, if we were to do this, is about 1.33% of our expenditure per year. So we're not looking at a 10% reduction in expenditure. We're looking at a 1.33% reduction, and it may be slightly more if we exclude roads. I understand that. But I do think, you know, we have to make an example and have to do something for our long-suffering ratepayers. And that's my proposal, Madam Mayor. I'm proposing it as a way forward.
Thank you. Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor. We don't know at this stage the full impact of COVID-19 on the economy, on our economy as a council, and on our ratepayers. But what we have seen in some businesses in the last couple of weeks since the restrictions have been eased is it is very slow to come back to a sustainable revenue for some businesses. They are hurting, and the small businesses, as we spoke about in an earlier item, are the ones that are going to be most affected. And our economy in Oberon is made up largely of small business enterprise and their employees. Now, we could be heading into one of the highest unemployment percentages in our recent history. So I think, you know, anything that we can do to even provide a glimmer of hope and some relief for our ratepayers, especially in the next 6 to 18 months, we should make every endeavour to do. There are people that won't go back to a job. There are people that will go back to earning less than what they were earning. There'll be businesses that'll close down. We don't know the full effect, and we probably won't see it till after Christmas. But I think we're heading into very uncertain times, and it could be very difficult times for a lot of our ratepayers. So I think we should make every endeavour to reduce some costs and pass on a rate cut, or at least not increase the rates. And I urge everybody to vote for this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Capel.
Madam Mayor, I'd like a ruling from you, please. The last motion that we voted on was to deal with these 11 items one at a time.
Yeah.
We seem to have jumped onto item 2 now to be talking about the rates. The first one is adopting the operational plan and the long-term financial plan, but we're talking about the rates. So if we've decided to go and debate these issues one at a time, let's do it one at a time. Otherwise, what are we doing? I
understand where you're coming from, Councillor. I assume from Councillor McKibben's amendment, the long-term and operational plan and long-term financial plan do actually mention the rates. So I think it could have come in either 1 or 2. Councillor? Councillor Capel?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Councillor Capel?
Well, if that
Is that,
If that's the case, Madam Mayor, if that's the case, that
Yeah.
we're talking about the rates now, I would like to speak against the amendment, but I'll wait until my right of reply, I guess, will I?
this is the amendment, isn't it? Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think we can't adopt the operational plan and long-term financial plan as it is. That's why I've raised the amendment now and said we adopt it subject to the following amendments. I realise it impacts on 2 and following to some degree, but if I don't raise it here, we adopt the operational plan and long-term financial plan as is, which I'm suggesting we need some changes. So I can't, if I don't raise it now, and we get to 2, everyone will say, well, you've adopted the operational plan and long-term plan. How can you do it now?
Yep, I can see that is a logical argument. Happy for you to speak now, Councillor Capel. It is the amendment. You can speak to the amendment.
And the amendment is that we do not increase our rates and we do not increase payments to councillors.
Yeah.
All lumped together, is that right?
There were 3 items there, A, B and C, that Councillor McKibben has mentioned. Do you want to see the amendment up on the screen?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Okay. So there's the amendment, Councillor. That Council adopts draft, that Council adopts draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan at attachment 1 with the following substantive changes. That Council not increase rates by the rate peg for 2020-21, which is 2.6%. That Council does not accept an increase in remuneration for the 2020-21 financial year, and that the General Manager be directed to find cost savings equivalent to 1.33% in expenditure in areas across the Council excluding roads, and resolves to publicly exhibit the plan for 28 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. Submissions received during the public exhibition period will be considered and presented to the July Ordinary Council meeting prior to final adoption. So that is the amendment, Councillor Capel.
Thank you. Yeah, can I speak against that now?
Yep.
Thank you. I know that there are people in the community, a number of people in the community who are hurting, mainly due to the effects of fires earlier on and the COVID-19. However, we as a council, we have brought in a policy that we are assisting ratepayers who are having trouble paying their rates. We have a no interest on overdue rates for the next 6 months or so. I've been doing some calculations on this, and while I only have a small holding, 2.6% increase in rates will mean $54 to us. And that's a pretty easy calculation. If somebody pays $10,000 in rates, and I don't know what the biggest ratepayers in this area pay, but there wouldn't be many paying $10,000 a year rates. That'll mean an extra $260. I think that we would be making a mistake not to increase the rates. We still are expected to maintain services, provide all of the things that people expect, and I just think it would be a major mistake. When it comes to councillors' fees, I'm not too worried about that. Again, as we said last year, we have to think of the ramifications into the future of doing that. And the fees that are paid to councillors, really in the budget, in the sense of the budget's neither here nor there. What we're doing, I guess, is making a statement in the hope that we'll probably be re-elected next year.
Thank you, Councillor. We have any further comments on this one, Councillor? This is a very important decision that we're making here this evening, councillors, and I ask you to think about it and give your views. Councillor Doney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with that sentiment. I do think we need to be a bit careful. If we were not to increase rates, forgive me, let me take one step back. For myself, I'm happy to waive the councillor increase, though I'm not sure how sensible that is a long-term decision. Secondly, if we do not increase the rates and leave them as they are, and direct council to make 1.33% cost saving, they will also need to make an additional cost saving of approximately about 1.7 of their wages bill, because their wages are going to increase by 2.5 to 3%. And I'm not sure what the number is, but if we give council no more revenue, then they are potentially going to either lose staff, or not potentially, will have to either lose staff or lower expenditure to that 1.3%, which is the CPI plus the 1.7 equivalent wages, and that's 1.7 of about 5 or 6 million. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head. So that concerns me. My suggestion might be that we look to choose a lower level of rate increase just to sustain matters as they are, not the full 2.6. That could be 1.5 or something of that effect. I'm just putting that out there for consideration, so that council is not actually withdrawing employment and expenditure from the community. I don't think council should do that at the moment. So I put in the discussion that forcing 1.3% of savings and no rate increase, I think equally is not good for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor? Councillor Kellam. Can we unmute Councillor Kellam, please?
Just occurred, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I agree substantially with Councillor Doney. And just so that everyone is aware, that any increase at this stage, state governments is to recover that at a later stage. And whether that is palatable or not is another matter entirely. But reducing the rate increase to zero is a compounding, and it will compound forever. And there's more than a 2% or 2.6% loss of rates in 1 year. It is 2.6% loss of rate revenue over the next, however we choose to and in fact over the next decade. Again, I'm neither here nor there about council's increase, but the staff increase, which has just been negotiated, which is 2.5% and is yet to be ratified by government, although, and that'll be a point of contention. That's going to take up a fair chunk of our rate increase, and a 1.33% reduction in expenditure is going to hurt. I don't think that I'm happy to have that those particular changes worked through so that we can see what the effect is. But we'll be making, if we do that tonight, we'll be making that decision without the information in front of us. It is, at the moment, it is just a series of figures which seem like a good idea, but they have not been analysed as yet.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibbons.
Through the chair, I believe a 1.3 increase is down the middle. I think it's, I'd certainly support something like that, because I know a real lot of people are hurting in certain areas, particularly in the town area, that are not sure about jobs. I know some of the farming community is doing well, but we've hit them hard over the last few years. I just think there's a little bit of compassion we could show, and I believe that we'd be doing that if we went 1.3%. As far as council increases go, I think the figures say we haven't had an increase in 3 years in a row, and it doesn't worry me either way, but I think future councillors, we don't want to leave them too far behind, because for the simple reason, it's not the easiest job in the world, and there's a big commitment when you become a councillor, and it seems to be getting bigger and bigger every 3 years. So I think it's time we had a remuneration there. And yeah, and I'd like, you know, there's a possibility the GM can look at ways of cost cutting to make up the difference. So I think it's time to review the whole thing and go with a smaller rate increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCarthy.
I agree with the no increase and no increase in the remuneration. It's green at the moment, but we forget for 3 to 4 years we've been carting hay in. That hay's got to be paid for. It's probably taken long-term loans. Some of it was donated, very little though, really. I think our community's out there hurting, and this is a glimmer of hope that just shows that we care. I know that it's going to be an impact, but I think without the increase we can still get through. It's like the consultant we had. He's told us we've got to do maintenance on the roads. We've been bringing that up at works meetings and general meetings for ages. It's not until we get a consultant in at a considerable amount of money that we take any notice. So I support no increase in the rates.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other comments here, councillors? Could I ask, as this is such an important decision that we're going to make here tonight, that I can get a comment from the General Manager, either the General Manager or the Director, on the ramifications of what we're considering here?
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ultimately, what we're proposing here is to put a operational plan on exhibition, Madam Mayor. We're not making the decision on whether council should go down this path or not. Whilst I acknowledge everything that everyone said in the room, we're looking to get a document on exhibition to allow for the public, councillors and the like to make comment as to what they believe to be the best way forward for our council. I'm prepared and I'm happy for our staff to bring back a report in July outlining what the ramifications of decreasing the number of things that has been outlined in the spread of options that councillors have put out. But ultimately what we want to do is also hear from the community about what they believe the best way forward. And I think that that's probably something that we could defer with further information brought back to councillors prior to adoption. I'll further note in the report, a number of options have been considered as part of not taking a rate increase, minimising the rate increase. And there's a considerable amount of information there that talks about why the staff have indicated their preferred recommendation and the draft operational plan as it sits. So I just want to make councillors aware of that. as because I'm sure there'll be a number of submissions lodged by our community outlining different things that council will consider prior to the adoption of the 2021 operation plan.
Thank you. Does the director wish to add anything to that?
No, I concur with the General Manager. This recommendation is to adopt the draft resolution, the operational plan and long-term financial plan, to put it on exhibition for 28 days so that we can further work on it in accordance with suggestions that might be raised by either councillors or community.
Thank you. From my perspective, I'm still to be convinced that waiving the full rate increase is a good idea. I am open to a lower reduction, possibly of 1.5%, maybe. I'm yet to be fully convinced about it. I'm quite happy with the no increase in the councillor remuneration. And I'd like a little bit more information around the General Manager identifying the savings in the third part of that amendment. So as we are putting this out for exhibition, and there is time then for councillors to be better informed about the repercussions of a decision they're going to make when the plan comes back, I would be speaking against this amendment, this particular amendment. I'm more than happy for the operational plan to go on to public exhibition and to have the discussion on the rate issue when it comes back to council. So Councillor McKibben, would you like a right of reply there?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the issue here is that we are putting a fundamental policy and financial plan on public exhibition, and the ratepayers believe that the document they're seeing is going to be roughly the plan ahead for the council for the future. If we're intending to reduce the rate increase and to make savings and to have I think we should at least, we can't put a plan out that has basically, has all its premise on the basis there's going to be a 2.6% rate increase, there's going to be a council remuneration increase, and that expenses are going to basically be as foreshadowed. Because if we then resolve later not to, then the community might say, well, why didn't you tell us that you were going to look at that in the operational plan and financial plan? At the very least, we have to have something on this plan to say that the rates, expenses, etc., are still under review and council is considering a number of options. I don't believe we can put it out there as it is when we may be making potentially these substantive changes. And that's why I've raised it as part of, as an amendment to recommendation 1.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the General Manager.
Through the chair, equally, Madam Mayor, as part of the exhibition process, you might at the end of it decide to take up the full 2.6%. Like, each of the options that have been raised here are something that we would consider as part of that exhibition process. Now, what I'm suggesting is that, as the report highlights, there are a number of options for council to consider, and I'm more than happy during the exhibition phase to put the council are looking at a number of options. Those options include not taking up the rate increase, partially taking up the rate increase, looking at levels of service and reduction in levels of service, because that's what you've asked in a savings document that you want me to do. But I don't know what they are yet, so I don't know that I can tell you that this is what we will do or this is what we won't do, because at the end of the day, that will be a decision for councillors to make based on a report that we submit together with the public exhibition details from the community.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Doney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just just looking at it from the other perspective, can I ask for some comment on what effect this increase would have on the pensioners of town? And then before any wag jumps in and thinks this is a self-interested sectional question, it's not. But I'm just thinking, you know, often we look at a number of groups, but we forget the less outspoken. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure what the adjustments in the pension are, and I'm not sure what the adjustments in the local government and state government rebate that we make up. So I'm just asking what would be the impact of that 2.6% on that group from either director or general manager, if possible.
Through the general manager.
I'll defer to the corporate services director.
Thank you.
Through the Mayor, it is very difficult to say without having a look at where the councillors live. Where they live will depend on how much their rates increase. It would depend on the values. I could not answer that at this point in time. We would have to do an analysis on that, Councillor Doney. And we still do have the pensioner rebate, so that is something that council and the state government are continuing.
Madam Mayor, I may have made that a bit difficult. What is the adjustment process for pensions on an annual basis? Can someone remind me?
The increase in the pension?
Yes.
It's CPI, I think, isn't it? I'm really not sure either.
I'm sorry, I haven't looked.
Which highlights to me that we need further information around the repercussions of what we're considering here.
Which would put it at about 1.3%, if that's the case.
Yeah.
I believe.
So therefore, a pensioner, you know, is immediately going to be 1.2% worse off. Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, councillors, is there any further comment on this one? Because I'm going to have to put the amendment. Sorry, I can't hear.
Busy. Councillor Callum.
Where is Councillor Callum?
That's a very good question.
I can hear him. We can't hear
Callum
you.
has left the building.
Councillor Callum is in the attendees.
There he is.
Okay. Start there.
Have you been following that debate, Councillor Callum?
I have.
Have a comment?
There is actually another recommendation that we should put in there, if as consideration, is that the council staff analyse the proposed changes and bring that back to council in July for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Capel. Councillor Cape, can we unmute Councillor Capel? Sorry, Councillor Capel.
That's all right. I think I'm away. Yeah, I would be happy to accept in my motion we're talking about the amendment, aren't we?
We're talking about the amendments first of all, Councillor.
Yeah, righto. So it's not up to me.
Okay.
Not up to me to accept anything. Yeah, righto.
Okay, councillors. If there's nothing else, I'm Councillor General Manager.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just by way of clarification, the current amendment says something different than what we're proposing now. If you're going to include Councillor Callum's addition that staff do an analysis, because and I can't see the amendment in front of me, but what I've written down is that we adopt the draft 21 long-term and operational plans for exhibition with the following changes. And those following changes are: there are no rate peg, that councillors don't increase their allocation, and the GM finds savings of 1.33%, excluding roads. Now, if the amendment is supported in that nature, it's not an analysis or any, that is the amendment.
That is the outcome.
That is the outcome
Yep.
of this.
I agree. Yep. Okay, councillors, well, the amendment is there, and we need now to vote on it. Sharon, could I get the amendment actually brought up so everybody is absolutely clear on what they're voting on at this point in time? So the amendment is that Council adopts the draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan at attachment 1 with the following substantive changes. That Council not increase rates by the rate peg for 2020-21, that councillors not accept an increase in remuneration for the 2021 financial year, that the General Manager be directed to find cost savings equivalent to 1.33% in expenditure in areas across the council excluding roads, and resolves to publicly exhibit the plan for 28 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993, and that submissions received during the public exhibition period will be considered and presented to the July Ordinary Council meeting prior to final adoption. Now that is the amendment, councillors, that you're voting on now, and I'm now going to put the amendment. All in favour? 3. All against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The amendment is lost. We go back now to the original motion. That Council adopts the draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan at attachment 1 and resolves to publicly exhibit the plan for 28 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. Submissions received during the public exhibition period will be considered and presented to the July Ordinary Council meeting prior to final adoption. Now, the mover of that motion was Councillor Capel. Councillor Capel, do you have anything further to add? Can we unmute Councillor Capel, please?
It just depends if there's any further discussion, Madam Mayor. If there is further discussion, I would hold off for my right of reply.
Councillor McCarthy, do you wish to speak again to that? You were the seconder?
You got to have a seconder to get the discussion going.
Thank you. Comments? Any other comments, councillors, or have we? Okay, Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We talked about a recommendation that the General Manager consider looking into savings that amount to 166,000, let's say, whatever the figure was, and provide a report, 166,527, which is a projected deficit of if a 2.6% rate peg is not adopted.
Yep.
So I would have thought that needs to be incorporated within this recommendation to be provided at the July meeting. Or it can be a separate
recommendation. Would like to see
recommendation.
that incorporated in this recommendation, councillor? Is that what you said?
Yes, or it can be a separate recommendation.
Councillor Capel, it's your motion.
I'm not sure, Madam Mayor, of the wording that Councillor McKibben's suggesting.
Could you repeat it, please, Councillor McKibben?
Prior to the word submissions in recommendation 1, the General Manager shall investigate and provide a report on potential savings of $166,527 in expenditure, excluding roads, for the July 2020 council meeting. And then the sentence will remain, submissions received during public exhibition, etc. That will remain. So it's adding a sentence in between.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Capel, did you get that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really think it's a separate issue, but
Okay, we can deal with that separately.
yeah, I think it would be better.
Thank you. So Councillor McKibben, you're putting an amendment then, another amendment to that motion to bring up your...
I'm happy to have, if it helps, to have a resolution 1A that would read the same wording as I have just suggested, if that helps Councillor Capel and others.
Councillor Capel, this has either got to be part of part 1 or it needs a separate recommendation or an amendment.
Oh, yeah. For the sake of, am I on? Yeah, for the sake of expediency, I'll accept the addition.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy, as the seconder.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
You happy with that? Is there any comment on it before I bring this up on the screen, councillors? Sharon, could we bring up the screen on the screen with the addition, please, to the part 1? So the motion now is that Council adopts draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan at attachment 1 and resolves to publicly exhibit the plan for 28 days in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. The General Manager shall investigate and provide a report on potential savings of $166,527 in expenditure, excluding roads, for the July 2020 Council meeting. Submissions received during the public exhibition period will be considered and presented to the July Ordinary Council meeting prior to final adoption. I'm putting that recommendation, councillors. All in favour? That resolution is carried. Thank you. We now go to part 2. That Council adopts and resolves to publicly exhibit the Statement of Revenue Policy at attachment 2, including 2020-21 fees and charges and 2020-21 rating structure.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, but you have been you've muted and I can't seem to unmute you. I'm sorry. You need to unmute yourself. I'm not sure what happened there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now, councillors? Okay. Okay, I'll read it again. Part 2, that Council adopts and resolves to publicly exhibit the Statement of Revenue Policy at attachment 2, including the 2021 fees and charges and 2021 rating structure in accordance with Chapter 15, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1993. The following rates and charges are set for every parcel of rateable land within the Oberon local government area for the period from 1 July 20 to 30th June 21. Can I have a mover, please, councillors? Councillor Doney, and a seconder, please. Councillor Swannell. Councillor Kellam. Thank you. Councillor Doney.
These fees and charges are calculated on the basis of the 2.6% rate increase, and so
Madam Mayor, if I could, the fees and charges are actually calculated on CPI increase of 1.3%.
Did you hear that, Councillor Doney? Councillor Doney's muted. Thank you.
I brought myself back in. I did note that, Madam Mayor. I said the rates are on 2.6%.
1.3, Councillor. 1.3%. The Director has just informed you.
No, Madam Mayor.
Sorry?
The rates are on 2.6%.
Okay.
The fees and charges are a different matter.
Okay.
So it's really a formality, much of this, until we decide exactly how much that rate increase would be. The only other thing I'd say is that that's the best presentation of fees and charges I've ever seen while I've been here, and it was the most easy one to understand I've ever come across in council papers, so that was good. But unless someone can point out something else to me, this is based on 2.6% for the rates and other issues, CPI 1.3 for the fees and charges. So there's not much to talk about with this section.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Callum.
Happy with what Councillor Doney said. It's a pretty good summation of the nature of recommendation 2.
Thank you. Comments, councillors? Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I take it, obviously FG, H and I are amended as per the Director of Corporate Services comments earlier, and we're adopting those amendments. And the second thing is, we're adopting a statement of revenue policy to be exhibited when we haven't actually determined that we are going to increase the rates by 2.6%. That's my only concern, and that the fees and charges by 1.3%. We're putting it down pretty equivocally here that that's what we're accepting, which we haven't adopted really.
We've only adopted.
I just don't know that that's appropriate.
We've adopted to put it on public exhibition, councillor, for submissions. And as the General Manager indicated, he's happy to put an appendum on it that we are considering various options within the report or within the.
I'm happy on the basis of the addendum, and yeah, on the basis the addendum's included.
General Manager.
If, through the chair, as part of our exhibition process, we'll make that very clear, councillor. One will lead into the other. This is purely for exhibition. Should council resolve to do something else, then that will have a flow-on effect through these resolutions coming back for endorsement. So we will make it very clear to our community that one of the intrinsic processes that councils want to see is the potential for not having a rate peg for the 2021 year.
Thank you to the General Manager. Any other comments, Councillor McKechnie? No? No. Any other comments? Councillor Gibbons.
I'm not sure whether I'm in the right department, Madam Mayor, but it just was a question as fees and charges. It's in the attachments for the machinery, and I was just going to ask a question about that. It's page 23 of what?
Which document are you talking of, Councillor? Charges.
Attachment 1, page 23.
Attachment 1, thank you.
It's got the rates, hourly rates of the machinery and graders and loaders, but down a bit further, I know we discussed this once before, and it's the utilities. And I was just going to ask on that, is the utilities running around at $72 an hour? Is that to be added onto the grader with operator at 192, or is it, how's all that worked out?
Okay, through the General Manager.
I'm happy to refer to the Technical Services Director.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, the utility charge is separate to any other plant hire charge. So in the case that Councillor Gibbons has asked, it is a separate charge in addition to the grading or the grader.
Thank you.
Is that an hourly rate or is that a daily rate?
Through the chair, that's an hourly rate.
That puts a grader with his operator at $260 odd an hour. Yeah. That's for private works, RMS, or is that how you base when you go out to work out how much a road is going to cost to construct, is the grader worked out at that 260 with the vehicle?
Through the chair, there's an external rate and an internal rate, two different rates. But yeah, for a private work, that would be the applicable rate.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, my information says per half hour at the top of this, or am I misreading?
Yeah. Sorry. Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
could I suggest for some of these things that we actually...
Councillor McKibben. Councillor Gibbons is still speaking.
Uh,
Sorry. Are you still speaking, Councillor Gibbons?
Just after what Councillor Doney said, I believe that he's not correct there in the half hourly rates. These are hourly rates.
Thank you.
Is this correct? Can I go to the director, please?
Madam Mayor, through the chair, they are hourly rates. The document allows for a half-hour charge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the minimum charge for all planned equals half an hour.
Oh, thank you.
What that says.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor McKibben, sorry. Can we unmute Councillor?
Last year. Sorry. Can I suggest, Madam Mayor, and I think I raised it last year, that we put a fourth column in here saying unit of charge. And then we put HR for hour, DAY for day. For some it's attendance, you know, because for some of these it's clear where it talks about kilograms, etc. Excess mass charges per kilogram. But for some of these things, I think we need to make it clearer.
Okay, Councillor, we'll take that as a
We
comment.
not put a fourth column in. I think I raised this last year.
We can take that as a comment for this through the submission period. Other comments on this
Do I
one?
need to put a separate submission in, or will that be taken as a submission?
No, we can take that up as a submission. I go through the general manager. Yep.
Yeah, through the chair, it'll just be taken on board as part of councillor's commentary in this regard.
Thank you. Councillor Doney. Councillor Doney.
Just a minor one, Madam Mayor, on page 35.
Yeah.
Acceptable investments. Option B says debentures or securities issued by a council within the meaning of the Local Government Act. Is that correct? So a council can issue debentures or securities, and other councils can invest in another council through those debentures and securities. Is that right?
Go to some advice from the director. Page 35 of 35.
Yes, it is actually. That's a state government.
Okay, Councillor, I have the page now. Could you please repeat your question?
Option B, to my reading, suggests that a council can issue debentures or securities and that another council can purchase them as acceptable investment strategies.
No, Councillor Doney, my understanding is that any debentures or securities issued by council, some of the larger councils have the ability to do that, but the smaller councils, it's not. There are a few, very few councils who have the ability to do that, yes.
Okay, I was surprised by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKibben. Can we unmute?
I take Councillor Doney's point, Madam Mayor, but we have just put an investment policy in place that says there has to be an ADI in place, so we wouldn't be investing in other councils' debentures or securities in any event, unless they were ADI, added ADI, and they were rated.
Unless, Madam Mayor, it was a hostile takeover.
Thank you, councillors. Is there any other comments on this one, councillors? If not, I'm going to put the recommendation. Council adopts and resolves to publicly exhibit the Statement of Revenue Policy Attachment 2, including the 2021 fees and charges and 2021 rating structure in accordance with Chapter 15, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1993. The following rates and charges are set for every parcel of rateable land within the Oberon local government area for the period from 1 July 20 to 30th of June 21. All in favour, councillors? Oh, sorry, I didn't see that the director wants to.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, could I suggest that before you vote on this, that you actually put a draft in front of the council adopts and resolves to probably exhibit the draft statement of revenue policy. You are going to.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Sharon?
I'll propose that amendment, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, councillor.
I'll propose that amendment. You'll need an amendment, won't you? To add the word draft.
Well, Councillor Doney and Councillor Keller may agree to add that extra word.
Happy?
Happy, Councillor Doney?
Not sure, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. So have you got that, Sharon?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Putting that recommendation, councillors, sorry for that. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Number 3, that council will continue operations during the period 1 to 21 July 2020 using 1/12 of the draft 2020-21 operational plan. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor McKibben and Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I foreshadow an amendment that we move to deal with 3 to 11 as a combined recommendation.
Okay.
So that we don't have to vote on each of them individually.
Okay. So I've already got a mover for number 3. So the amendment is going to be, councillor, that we deal with?
That council deal with recommendations 3 to 11 inclusive as a combined recommendation or combined vote. We vote on these
Yep, got
as
it.
combined recommendations.
Is there a seconder, councillors? Councillor Kellam, thank you.
Madam Mayor, just
Comments, Councillor McKibben?
sorry. I don't mean to be a stick in the mud, Madam Mayor. However, you've previously resolved to deal with them individually.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that'll be a rescission motion then.
In terms of, I understand the council's want and desire. However, I don't think you want to wreck the last 3 recommendations that you've made by now going back and wanting to rescind the resolution you've already made.
Yeah, I take it.
I'll rescind the amendment. I'll
The amendment. Thank you.
withdraw the amendment.
I take your point, General Manager.
Apologies, councillors.
Okay, we're on number 3 then, councillors. Councillor McKibben, you're the mover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It speaks for itself.
Thank you. Councillor Keller.
Happy, Madam Mayor.
Comments, councillors? Put the recommendation, councillors, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Number 4, the council notes the 2019-22 delivery program at attachment 3, which has been updated with financial data from the 2021-22-23 financial years in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor Kellam, a seconder. Councillor Capel. Councillor Kellam.
That we've put extra data in.
Councillor Capel. Sorry, I can't hear you. Councillor Capel, can we unmute Councillor Capel, please? Councillor Capel?
I think, yep, righto. After all that again, it's very clear. Nothing
Thank you.
to add.
Comments on number 4, councillors? Put the recommendation, all in favour? Thank you. Number 5, that council notes the water and sewer asset, building and infrastructure asset management plans at attachment 4A, 4B, 4C in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, Councillor Kellam. Councillor McKibben.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. The plans speak for themselves in the attachments.
Thank you. Councillor Kellam.
No further comment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 6, that council notes the 2019-22 Workforce Management Plan at attachment 5 in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor Gibbons, and a seconder, please. A seconder, Councillor Kellam. Thank you. Councillor Gibbons.
Both in accordance with the Local Government Act. No more to add.
Thank you. Councillor Kellam.
The Workforce Management Plan highlights some of the structural issues we have with our workforce, and the devil in that one is in the detail of how we continue to manage it and hopefully solve the problem eventually.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 7, that council notes that the draft 2020-21 operational plan and long-term financial plan has been prepared in line with the objectives contained in council's community strategic plan and the integrated planning and reporting requirements within the Local Government Act 1993, but the preparation of the draft 2021 operational plan and long-term financial plan has been affected by the impacts on council and the community from the COVID-19 pandemic. Can I have a mover, please, councillors? Councillor Kellam and Councillor McKibben. Councillor Kellam.
Nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McKibben.
No, nothing further to add.
Any other comments, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 8. Notes that council notes that COVID-19 pandemic has introduced significant uncertainty into council's program and financial planning, particularly with respect to own source council revenues, and that council will need to closely monitor and manage programs and financial performance during the 2020-21 via quarterly budget reviews. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben, thank you, and Councillor Capel. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there can be no truer statement, and I think this is a highly appropriate recommendation in the current environment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Yeah, nothing really more to add. I was just going to say that it has and we will.
Thank you. Comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 9, that council notes the long-term financial plan will be amended annually as more accurate information comes to hand. Income and expenditure forecasts become more accurate, and council will consider and utilise a range of options for achieving balanced budgets over the life of the long-term financial plan, including but not limited to realising efficiencies and cost reductions within council operations, applying reserve funds, reducing or rescheduling capital expenditure, and increasing revenue to fund specific programs and initiatives. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, please. Councillor McKechnie, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, a highly appropriate statement, especially in light of the current conditions, but also noting that talks about realising efficiencies and cost reductions. And there are a number of areas where we'll obviously be looking at this in relation to the roads review and other areas. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McKechnie.
No, nothing to add, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Anything else, councillors, on this one? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 10, that council authorises the General Manager to make any necessary editorial and content changes to the integrated planning and reporting documentation for public exhibition in order to give effect to council's resolutions. A mover, please. Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, please. Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously highly appropriate in light of the comments made previously about the cost savings, and that council hasn't yet come to a decision as to whether to move ahead with the 2.6% rate peg or a reduced amount or none at all. So I think appropriate. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kellam.
Nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments, councillors? I'll put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Number 11. That council resolved to seek comment on its current vision and mission statement during a 28-day public exhibition period. Can I have a mover for number 11, please, councillors? Councillor McKechnie, thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Kellam. Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's fairly straightforward. I think it's something that's topical in the community, so it'll be interesting to see what comments and submissions come in the exhibition period.
Thank you. Councillor Kellam.
I agree with Councillor McKechnie's words. I think it's quite topical in certain sectors.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, councillors, on this one? Councillor Doney. Councillor Doney.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, not on this one, but I just have a comment I'd like clarified after the vote is taken on this one.
Comment on number 11?
No, a prior vote.
Right. Will it affect the vote? Are you hoping to affect the vote, or just a comment?
I just want clarification of the nature of the section moved, because I may have voted against my wishes. I just want to check that out.
Thank you. I'm putting recommendation 11, that council resolved to seek comment on its current vision and mission statement during a 28-day public exhibition period. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Your comment, Councillor Doney.
Madam Mayor, I was just slightly thrown, because I went through these in a fair bit of detail, and so this going quickly through them a bit later on, and I kept looking for the strategic plan to come up as a specific item and be. Oh.
All right. I can hear you, Councillor.
Oh, can you? All right. Well, I've disappeared visually, so that's all right. I was looking for the delivery plan to come up as a specific item linked to the local strategic planning statement, which I didn't find. So I'm guessing that the strategic planning statement is hidden within number 7, or is included within number 7 as part of the community's strategic plan. Is that correct?
It does state that the operational plan and long-term financial plan has been prepared in line with the objectives of the community strategic plan, which is our overarching document.
And is the last item in the papers, which is the, just naming it, the local strategic planning statement, is that part of the community strategic plan?
I'm not sure of the question, where you're going here, Councillor Doney.
Well, I'm trying to find out where discussion of the local strategic planning statement is in these papers.
It's page 69, Councillor.
Through the chair, item 1304, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, councillors, we're now moving on to page 47, item 1303, town signage final design concepts. There's a recommendation in 3 parts there, councillors, that council endorse the natural beauty design concept in order for staff to progress the implementation of new signage across the LGA. that Council progress the implementation of new signage across the LGA in accordance with the report and funding requirements. That Council nominate the open tendering method as prescribed in accordance with clause 166(a) of the Local Government Regulation 2005 for the construction of the town signage project. Can I have a mover for the recommendation in 3 parts, please, councillors? Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, please. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, this has been a very thorough process, and it's good to see that we actually have a definitive winner in relation to concept by quite a margin. The only issue, obviously, that would concern us all, I suppose, is the concept of cost. And in that respect, in relation to recommendation 2, are we going to look at the options referred to on pages 53 to 55 as to which should apply as a separate recommendation, or are we sort of leaving that up in the ether to be decided later? My concern is that we need to be reasonably definitive in what we go out for our request for tender, so that we get some reasonable pricing. And I am concerned that the pricing will obviously be, because this is a preferred concept, will be maybe a lot higher than we think. So I just seek some clarification in that in proposing the recommendations, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Through the General Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Councillor McKibben, for that question. It's exactly the reason why we went with the number of options to consider as part of that tender brief. I believe that if you went with the entirety of the project, you would get some value adds, but we need to get some certainty around what that would mean. Hence the reason why we've provided the 3 options to say that is what we'll ask as part of the tender requirements. So yeah, the indicative cost says that given the preferred option, we may need to look at scaling the project. Hence the reason why we've asked for the 3 options.
Thank you, the General Manager. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit, I just wonder whether we should be going with options 1 and 2 on page 53 and 54, because really, I think option 3 is more than ample, really, for what we're asking. I think, 1 and 2 are more, I think they'd be nice to have, but really, I think we're going a little over the top, and I think we have to be a bit careful that our community also, doesn't think we're spending too much on this. I just think option 3 looks fair and reasonable. I mean, Edith and Mount David, yes, they're localities, but they're not villages to the same degree as the others. I mean, you could argue Black Springs has 4 entrances, but really the major ones are on the Abercrombie Road South and the Abercrombie Road East. So 2 major signs should be there, and I think that's amply put in option 3. I just think we're going to, I just like to make requests for tender simple so we get good answers back rather than giving too many options which tenderers use to muddy the water a bit sometimes. It's only a comment. I would be happy to add a recommendation to confine it to option 3, but I'd be interested to hear what other councillors' views are.
Thank you. Councillor, General Manager.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just through clarification, councils will remember as part of this project, they approved the scope of works to prepare this. Option 1 simply provides that scope of work. So if an option come back was too expensive, then council would have a fair and realistic understanding of what the scope and what the project was about. It's purely option 1 purely complies with the with the resolution made by council at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Doney.
Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor. In discussion with the community group down the hill last evening, they were very pleased to see the natural beauty one come up. But I note on page 55, under next steps, it says, should council endorse the natural beauty concept, a signage design toolkit will be developed and an open tender. Now, my concern is there's just a little bit of fine tuning we'd like to do to the signs now that we've got the broad concept as it's been explained. So how are we going to look at using the signage design toolkit if we're going straight to an open tender?
Through the General Manager.
Through the chair, the toolkit will inform the tender, councillor. So the development of the toolkit gives the prospective tenderers an opportunity to quote what the size, what the shape, what the preferred options were, and the toolkit is the mechanism to be able to do that.
And is there any further refining of the toolkit?
Sorry, General Manager, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Through this whole process, the options that have been endorsed by council have now been put on exhibition. Those exhibition documents have been dealt with. The final concept has been prepared by the consultant that we've engaged to do this. He has taken into consideration as part of this report the submissions that have been lodged through the exhibition phase, and this is the final product that he's proposing. There is a number of smaller and unique options that I'm sure that will be considered as part of each of the unique signs that we put for each of the localities. But we're looking to finalise this toolkit as part of this recommendation.
I think smaller and unique options gives me enough room to work with, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kellam, sorry.
I think a particularly good process we've been through with 2 lots of exhibitions for the public to comment, and it has resulted in a pretty resounding large minority of people who have signed up to the natural beauty concept. There is room to manoeuvre within the designs that are there, and the 3 options are really just a matter of number of different signs that we can go for. I think I certainly have no problem supporting the recommendations and supporting an open tender, and that open tender will then inform council on what level of signage we can get within reason.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKechnie.
Yes, Madam Mayor, just one point that I'm not sure if it's just been overlooked or these just been left off, but maybe Hazelgrove, we haven't forgotten Hazelgrove, have we?
Through the General Manager.
Through the chair, my understanding is Hazelgrove wasn't part of the signage rollout to start with. What the toolkit will enable us to do is to prepare signage in a consistent and ongoing way. This document is to prepare and inform the scope that we're looking to put in place. However, if council want to include Hazelgrove as part of one of the options, we'll include it, we'll add the signage, and we'll go to tender in that with that additional number of signs that are proposed in that locality.
Thank you. Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, I think we definitely should include it. It's a locality, the same as O'Connell, Warragher, Edith and Mount David. In fact, could be bigger than some of those 4. So I think we should definitely include it as part of our local government area. And I just think there'd be a slight on the area being one of the old areas in the local government area if we don't include it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibbons.
Through the chair, I'd like to see another round at a later date that so we can have many localities distinct on our tourist roads, and Hazel Grove would be just one of quite a few. Wiseman's Creek, Porters Retreat localities, they're all over the place where you've got clusters of housing. I don't think this is the right time. I think if Hazel Grove has a few houses and a great history, but there's a number of other places, local localities, and you do see when you're driving around, you're in the locality of Goldsby or somewhere else. I think they should be recorded in time, but not this time around.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, councillors? I'm putting the recommendation in 3 parts. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Page 69, councillors, item 1304, local strategic planning statement. The recommendation is that council endorse the Oberon local strategic planning statement, LSPS 2040. Can I have a mover, please? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been a lot of community engagement with this process and a lot of community feedback, which the Director has indicated has been taken up and considered in the strategic planning statement. So I agree with the recommendation that Council endorse the Oberon Local Strategic Planning Statement, LSPS to 2040.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kellam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agree with. I'd like to have an undertaking from the General Manager to review and update the LSPS by the end of this year. There are some submissions I know have not been included as yet or been looked at carefully, and I think that we need to perhaps have a further look at this, noting that we do have to have it in local Office of Local Government by the end of this month, so there's not a chance to update it before then.
Thank you, Councillor. Have any comment, General Manager?
Through the chair, given the resolutions you've made in previous reports, the LSPS may need to be updated by virtue of a potential change in vision or mission statement that's been proposed to be looked at by by the resolution that you've previously made. In terms of the strategic planning statement, it's been substantially consulted with the community, and those comments have been taken into consideration in preparation of this report. The review is required every 7 years. However, I note, given the recommendations that we've made previously, it's going to happen a lot quicker than that. But the strategic words and visions within that document and the land use sentiment that applies to that document as it sits now will continue in perpetuity in line with all the other strategic documents that we develop.
Thank you. Councillor Doney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some minor things and some major things. Just on in the Mayor's forward, I know there's been some typos adjusted, but the term "the Great Divide," I would have thought that would be capital letters, as in a proper noun. Otherwise, I don't know what the Great Divide is if it doesn't have capital letters. Some sort of social division. That's on page 2 of the statement, just to be a little pedantic. Could I please ask through the General Manager, the Director of Planning and Development, to just take a look at page 70 in the business papers. And in the second part of the page, it says 6 government department submissions and 7 community submissions have been reviewed with suggested LSPS inclusions and amendments, which on review resulted in minor changes being made to the LSPS. The second dot point, discussions removed from actions 1 to 4, as the other actions do not incorporate discussion points, and questions have been raised by the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment about the statements which were being made after the action points.
Page are you on, Councillor?
Page 70
Page 70.
of the
None of the attachments of the business papers, Madam Mayor.
the business papers, I said, yes.
Yep, got it. Yep.
The second dot point.
Yep.
I've looked at that multiple times. I cannot make any sense whatsoever of what that is saying. None whatsoever.
Thank you, Councillor. Can we have some clarification, please, from the Director through the General Manager?
Yes, Madam Mayor. All the other action points don't have that discussion after it. The draft was the only one that did. So, and it was only those 4 points. It just seemed to me if we have discussion points after actions, we should have one after all the actions, and we didn't do it. So I just didn't think it was consistent with the rest of the document. That's why I took those out of the 4 points.
Thank you.
I obviously have to familiarise myself. Then my other point is in the delivery plan, we allocate, I think, 1.1% of funding towards heritage. In the submissions to the local strategic plan from several of the people making those submissions, they talk about landscape and cultural heritage. Neither the term heritage or historical context or any notion of landscape heritage appears in the strategic plan whatsoever. And if you were to look at the vision statement and anything to do with tourism, what we are attempting to attract people here with is natural beauty. The heritage tours are equally successful up there with the forest and foraging tours. But heritage and natural landscape occur nowhere in this document. And I find that actually to be unacceptable. So I think that needs, to me, to be readdressed. It's even part of our delivery plan. It's part of so many of our other documents, and it's not part of our long-term strategic plan. They're not mentioned.
The LSPS, you mean, not the
Yes.
not the community strategic plan, the LSPS.
The LSPS, that's right.
Okay.
So it's in the submissions, it's
Yeah.
in the delivery plan, it's in our vision statement, it's in our tourism documents, and nowhere is it in this document here.
Maybe we could get a comment on that through the General Manager, through the Director.
Yes, of course, Madam Mayor. It does talk about the environment on page 36, 84. So it does.
Forgive me interrupting, Madam Mayor. It talks about the strong agricultural economy, which I thoroughly support, but it doesn't talk about the issues I'm talking about.
Through the chair, page 37, promote and preserve our natural environment and wildlife habitat.
Agreed.
Goes with the government agencies to further develop and provide opportunity for natural areas of the local government area.
I agree, but as I said, there's no mention of heritage and there's no mention of cultural and landscape heritage. which we have one. We have, you know, we have several conservation areas, and the submissions, you had submissions both from several areas of the local government area, from both ends of the local government area, talking about the importance of landscape preservation, but it is not in this document.
Okay. Any further comment from the General Manager or the Director? If this is coming, thank you.
Also, direction 16 and 17 on page 32. They don't talk about, they talk about the heritage assets and the Aboriginal heritage.
Page 32.
Planning priority 2, yeah, community wellbeing.
Conserve and adaptively reuse heritage assets. I didn't quite see that as the same as the issues raised in the submissions and in some of the governmental submissions as well. I mean, adaptively reuse a heritage asset, that's Malachi Gilmore. Some people are coming from Sydney to see Malachi Gilmore, but most are coming to see a bit of snow and a great deal of natural beauty. That's what they come here for.
Okay, Councillor. Thank you. I note that this will be coming back probably for review, dependent on previous resolutions. Maybe we could ask the Director to have a look at that, but I do also note that this has to be in with the department by the 1st of July.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to the General Manager to see what the what a solution may be here, or
through the chair. Whilst it might not say exactly what Councillor Doney is asking, certainly the provisions outlined by the Director give some, I believe, would give some comfort to the fact that we don't shun away from protecting the integrity of our heritage item. This is a land use document that goes with land use, and with that, a heritage provision needs to be considered as part of that. I think that things that have been raised by the Director would, in its initial phase, meet the requirements that have been proposed by Councillor Doney.
thank you. Councillor Doney.
I think this will take a while to work its way through the system, Madam Mayor. I certainly appreciate any improvement in bringing heritage and environmental assets into a higher profile. Even the departmental letters and submissions at the end for both residents and departmental submissions all tend to focus on these issues of heritage landscape and environmental assets, and I don't think we give them enough of a role in our statement.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll note those comments. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Going to put the recommendation. All in favour? Against? So Councillor Doney is against. The recommendation is carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 72, councillors' reports for information. Item 1401, monthly activity report, General Manager. The recommendation is that the item is received for information. Can I have someone to move this, please? Councillor McKibben and Councillor Gibbons, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, a thorough report. I've just got some comments if I could. Page 74, under 32-210519, the Oberon Sports Complex. It says funding opportunities through the federal government are currently in place. I thought they were currently being investigated, not in place.
Through the chair, we've lodged a number of funding opportunities in this space. That's why it's stated in that way.
Could I suggest it's slightly different and say the council is seeking through the federal government funding through a number of avenues or something like that? It could be thought that funding opportunities are currently in place may to some people mean they're actually being obtained. Anyway, I understand what we're saying, but yeah. Top of page 75. When does this trial complete? Is it the end of this month? So we have the report in July?
Through the chair, it'll be, the report will be back April, May, June, end of July.
On the, page 75, halfway down, the road management audit. Could you just remind me, I was actually expecting to see the report at this meeting. Could you please just remind me of the current time frame? We did meet on the 28th of May, absolutely, and went through the draft. I was expecting, as I said, a report to be tabled to this meeting. What's the current timetable?
Through the chair, we're looking at a response to those recommendations. As you're aware, a number of those recommendations need a detailed response, which is being prepared. We'll give that to consultant for the final document to be prepared, and hopefully it'll be done by the end of this year, financial year, end of June.
Will the steering committee see the response?
I'm happy to provide the steering committee response, yes.
If we could, please. Thank you.
Through the chair, the steering committee also assisted in that process by providing a number of responses themselves. So I think it'd be appropriate for the steering committee to see those things.
No, that's why I was asking. I just wanted to see where we were at. Okay. I understand 77. On page 78, in relation to the recruitment, Recovery has advised they're now able to conduct face-to-face pre-employment screenings. This is the bottom of page 78 under the heading recruitment. However, the following positions have still been placed on hold. Has that changed since writing this report, or they're still on hold? Noting that I think at least one of them may change as a result of the roads review.
Through the chair, a number may change, but given the restrictions being eased in the COVID, we are actively working towards business as unusual. And I say that because I don't think anything will be the same ever again. And that will be looking to implement those positions in the near future, where appropriate.
Subject to taking cognizance of what the roads review said and obviously some earlier comments today.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
I recommend the report be received as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibbons.
To the chair, just on page 74 with Borg and the sports facilities. It sounds as if you've had a meeting since our last meeting with Borg. It says on the bottom paragraph, meeting with Borg held to discuss moving the project forward and finalise draft the MAU and council to lodge a DA. So is that the way it reads? That's what's happened?
No, I think that refers to a previous meeting. I'll go to the General Manager.
Through the chair, a number of other meetings have been dealt with, and we're looking to progress that DA. It's one of the matters that we're looking to continually progress in order to give some clarification around what the proposal will look like.
I believe there's a meeting quite soon.
Right, Sam. Thank you. Just onto the checklist on page 77. Down the bottom, you have toilets daily checklist 45. I'm just a bit concerned of some of the outlying toilets and just wondering, did you just have a roster that, I mean, there's a lot around town. Any explanation of how a roster might work or does work to get around some of the other toilets, O'Connell, Flat Rock, Black Springs?
Page are you on, councillor?
77.
77?
77.
The council will know that as part of our COVID plans that we closed a lot of our outlying toilets given the capacity for the transmission of the virus. So we took the option to close a number of them. Closing a number of them gave us another opportunity to, in fact, enhance the cleaning within the ones that we consider of high risk, high use, and of importance locally. So that's where we concentrated, which is why the numbers are so high. It's the way that we've implemented that program. Once again, with the implementation and the relaxation of the COVID restrictions, we're progressively opening those back up, and the cleaning regime will continue as normal.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Page 83, item 1402, monthly activity report, planning and development. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. Can I have someone to move that, please? Councillor McKibben and Councillor Gibbons. Thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Madam Mayor, I noticed that the director has had an active month with dog declarations, noting on page 88, and the comment under compliance. Where are we with the indoor fitness centre? Bottom of page 83. When in June do we expect that to be finalised? Is that will achieve practical completion at that stage?
Through the General Manager to the Director? Or? Yep.
Yes, through the General Manager, through you to the General Manager, through to the Director. Thank you.
Mr Sullivan?
Yes, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. We're looking at finishing in July. It's progressing quite well. So, yeah, in early July.
Early July. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor.
I move the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Gibbons?
Yeah, page 84, the top square, the Oberon dog off leash. Just a bit sick of seeing it coming up every meeting where we see this and we see that. I nominated the amphitheatre area to be looked at 12 or 18 months ago. I just think it's time that with the right authorities, we go down and have a look at that. It's been set aside for our community use. It was used to store a lot of fill when they put that new weir in the dam to save it, the spillway. I think it's a great place for it. There's natural bushland there. There's a real level place. It's a big area, well grassed, few kangaroos around. I just think it's an opportunity for us to have a look and try and make a decision and get this off our books. I think it's been there too long. So I'm hoping that we can, councillors and management might be able to go down and have a look at it and bring it before council again shortly.
Thank you, councillor. I do note that this has been going on for quite some time, and we do have a new director who has been busy getting documents ready and finalised, and I'm sure that he will be now looking at these this moving forward.
Yeah, I just think it'd be an idea if, you know, a site inspection was made and councillors could come along and talk about it, so we can get things, you know. I think new director with new eyes, it's a great place. I've just seen these places in Lithgow and Bathurst, and people are loading up their pups in cars and travelling 6 and 8 and 10 kilometres to get to a site like this, and not as good as this site, but you know, it's 200 metres out of the town limits, and it's just a nice, quiet, peaceful place, plenty of shade, and I think we should be moving on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that it, Councillor? I can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Councillor Doney.
Just a question on page 83. The draft village community plans, which I would assume are at least substantially built on the SWOT analysis that was undertaken in community surveys, which is part of our local strategic whatever. Just when they go to exhibition and discussion, have we had the opportunity to have some idea of how that will occur yet?
The Director?
Through the chair, I think it's a bit unfair on the Director to answer this question, given he wasn't here when they
definitely.
on. So I'm quite happy to take the lead in this case, Madam Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
The draft village plans have been prepared. They are currently in draft, and we're reviewing them as they are now. COVID, you'll understand, has certainly made it very difficult for us to engage and go through the consultation that we would like to see in that regard, especially given we'd like to see our village plans have some ownership over those village groups that look after our villages so well. So it'll be a matter of, and given the easing of the COVID restrictions that we're finding pretty much by the week, that we'd be looking to go into the new financial year with firstly some consultation, pre-consultation potentially, and then an exhibition phase.
If possible, we're hoping that restrictions will allow public meetings relating to this.
And through the chair, I'd like to do it in accordance with our community engagement policy that says that we go and engage when we talk to our communities. The current restrictions haven't allowed us to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doney. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too am a little concerned about the village community plans, and I know it's been basically impossible to have the meetings at the villages, but a plan that is based on a SWOT analysis really is going off half-cocked. A SWOT analysis is really only the start of the event. It needs to be followed up. And as far as I'm aware, at Black Springs, and I guess the other places are the same, we had a very quick SWOT analysis one evening, and there's been no more discussion about the village plan. And as I say, I think a SWOT analysis is really only the first step that needs to be followed up, because it needs to be built, need to build on how we manage the strengths, what we do about the weaknesses and threats, and etc. It really should be a fairly long plan, a long program to come up with a decent village plan. And as you say, Mr. General Manager, to give ownership of these plans to the villages.
Through the General Manager.
Agree. But the thing is, we need to take something to our villages to give them something to look at, and that's what we're preparing to do.
Fair enough. Okay.
Thank you, councillor. Any more comments? Put the recommendation, councillors. All. Oh, councillor McCarthy, you have comment. Councillor McCarthy has. This is the second count. Councillor McCarthy, yeah, you're on.
The fitness centre, Madam Mayor, stick your head in the door. It needs some natural light, not just a laser light panel. It needs more windows. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I'm going to put the recommendation, councillors. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 89, item 1403, monthly activity report, technical services. The recommendation is that the report item be received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Can I have a mover, please, councillors? Oh, councillor Capel and councillor McKechnie, thank you. Councillor Capel. Councillor Capel.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm on the way.
You are?
Thank you. Yes, I have no a comprehensive report, but I have no questions or serious comments to make at this stage.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor McKechnie.
No, it speaks for itself, Madam Mayor. Fairly busy time and a comprehensive report. So that's. I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few questions, if I could, of the Technical Services Director. Obviously, there's an extensive roadworks program, and I note, I think, on Shoemakers Road, the concrete or metal grate has been removed, which has been appreciated and Burrigout residents were informed at the meeting recently. On the signage issues, I know that a whole lot of Burrigout signs around Burrigout have gone missing again. Are we able to put do anything to try and track these offenders down? It was discussed by the Mayor, and well, it was raised with the Mayor himself at Burrigout again the other day.
Yep, through the chair, we have actually sent a comprehensive list of and photographs of the vandalism that did occur to the New South Wales Police. They're actually following up with some lines of inquiry at the present time.
Okay, thank you. On the O'Connell water bore, I noticed that it's been completed and you're going to provide a updated costing to the General Manager and was subject to one of the questions earlier this evening. Halfway down page 91, I think the second comment that the meeting of the Oberon STP work is being scheduled for late May is probably needs to be updated, because the meeting was held, a schedule of activities was presented that needed to be achieved to bring this plant to fruition, and the further testing, and certain of those activities were dependent on the further testing in June. Have the testings been completed yet, or are they still waiting till the end of June to confirm what our projections are in relation to organic matter, etc.?
Yeah, through the chair, the testing is actually in progress as we speak. We will probably have some comprehensive results by the end of June. Further discussion has been had on Monday of this week with the Department of Primary Industry and Environment in relation to progressing the STP project, which is favourably moving along in terms of getting some concurrence in that space. So once those results are available, we'll certainly be looking to put together another working party to discuss the results and then how that then progresses in terms of funding and alike from that stage forward.
Okay, page 93, 2/3 of the way down the page, roadside vegetation management plan. Just to update you and the General Manager, I have talked to the UMCC General Manager in relation to this. It doesn't appear that we can get uniformity across all councils. So UMCC is going to come back to Oberon specifically on comments on its roadside vegetation management to get that resolved.
Thank you.
We can't get all councils to agree completely on everything. Some have already got some in place, some have got no plans in place and don't intend to put plans in place. And despite what we've indicated. Page 94, at the top, last section, there's a T missing. GPS units now installed on all council trucks of 4.5 GVM and above. On page 95, halfway down, I assume that the Jenolan Brigade shed won't have any asbestos and we won't have issues there that require a variation.
Through the chair, there's certainly no asbestos. I was at that site there this afternoon, actually having a further review of the site prior to the demolition with the RFS. So we're right to go there with clearing the site and levelling in the event of proceeding with construction of a new shed.
No further comments, Madam Mayor. I've lost sound.
Thank you, Councillor McKibben. Councillor Doney.
Page 96, Mayor, just looking for a comment through you and the General Manager on the Castlereagh Highway job. Was there any fat in that for us? And how nearing completion, what is the Director's view of the work done?
Through the chair, yes, the work, physical work or construction works have been complete in essence of council's part, barring the contractual work with the guardrail and the line marking. Bitumen sealing has been completed. There will be certainly an element of it from that particular work. I don't actually know that figure, but certainly can look at that further and report
That's
back.
right. Just that's all right. Just asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doney. Any other questions on this one, Councillor McCarthy?
25 to the Jenolan bushfire shed. Where is the outcome of the site? Is it going to be the existing shed footprint, or where are we up to? What's been decided by all the agencies?
Yep, through the chair, speaking with National Parks, Jenolan Caves Trust and the RFS, the outcome has been resolved. We believe on the existing footprint. Certainly there are a number of challenges with relation to the vehicle appliances of the Cat 1 type tankers, looking at potentially bigger doors to allow for better angle of parking those vehicles within the new facility, and potentially what other excavations may be had around the site with relation to the upper escarpment and the like, which certainly we're not of the view of going extensively into that escarpment, given the steep gradients and natures there of stability and alike. So the existing footprint is the answer to that.
So it's the existing footprint that was done about 20 years ago, and the add-on to the training room, is it? That was added on.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. And given the complexities of, if we were to deviate from that existing site, certainly would trigger a number of issues in relation to acquiring additional land from national parks and or concurrence from Jenolan Caves Trust. So it is understood, and we believe at this stage that a new facility, even being a bigger shed, will be, without challenges, certainly be able to be located within the existing area of where the former shed was.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gibbons.
To the chair, there's been some pothole patching. It's on page 89, but out on that Mount David Road, a strip of bitumen. I was through there the other day just after the pothole patching has happened. It's just a fairly dangerous little bit of road there for about nearly a kilometre. It might be worthwhile to have a look at it, because I think the road's deteriorating. Not sure whether there might be a bit of heavy vehicle movement on there at the present time. Normally it holds up to light traffic, but I think through winter we've got to keep a real check on that and may have to do a bit of an upgrade there. With the shoulder widening on up on the highway, so it was mainly to accommodate the guardrail. So they seal that area, do they? They seal from the fog line out to accommodate the guardrail. Is that the bitumen that happens there?
Through the chair, yeah, that was the scope of the work in terms of widening the shoulder as part of a safety project, and it did involve certainly bitumen or providing additional bitumen to the outer area of the road shoulder. Correct.
Just the meeting you attended, 98, page 98, the 14th of the 5th, South Wales Joint Planning Assessment Meeting. Now is that about giving us the opportunity to plan for heavy patching and sealing, and you get the opportunity to talk about the two defined places between here and Bathurst that Councillor McCarthy and myself talk about with regards to Mayfield Road and that lonely corner bend at the foot of the mount, that probably the worst bend between here and Bathurst, or what happens at those meetings?
Yeah, through the chair, those joint planning assessment meetings are conducted between council staff and the Transport for New South Wales regarding the maintenance funding for the forthcoming year, in terms of how that will be distributed, or like what Transport for New South Wales would like to see distributed across that network in terms of not only heavy patching or seals and safety improvements. It does give way for opportunity to discuss previous issues raised by council, like Mayfield Road intersection, lonely corner, and what you have mentioned. So that's certainly on the radar. Continue to advocate.
Through the director, Chris, Mr. Schumacher, you've got some heavy static happening there. We just can't hear you at all.
Yeah, look, so we'll continue
That's
to advocate. We'll continue to advocate for all those particular projects through those particular forums. But yes, Transport for New South Wales certainly are aware, and as I say, we'll continue to see if we can get those up in projects with funding.
And the final one was just below it, on the Water New South Wales up Macquarie Drought Relief Strategy meeting. It appears to be a meeting. So what happens with those?
Yeah, through the chair, two different meetings. The primary meeting with the Central Western area of councils, looking at different strategies with drought relief and options moving forward with preserving water, and what that can mean for opportunities specific to Oberon. In the Oberon space was looking at the opportunities of the weir to the Oberon Dam in supplying or building a pipeline, along with other mechanisms for again drought proofing Oberon's options. So that's where those meetings certainly went in that space, with putting that type of information forward to the state government for recommendation on priorities placement of drought funding options for Oberon Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions or queries on this one, councillors? Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Just a late request on the replacement signs being completed. I've noticed in my travels that a lot of the guideposts, well, a number of the guideposts that have been replaced after somebody runs over them, have not been gathered up and brought back to whence they should be. They just tossed off the side of the road. That's not good enough. If we could have them picked up and done something with, that would be good.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll take that on notice and look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Capel. Any other comments on this one, councillors? I'm going to put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 99, item 1404, monthly activity report, corporate services. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor McKibben and Councillor Doney, thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Extensive report. And it's good to see that things are getting back to, I think, if I quote the General Manager, nearly normal, or whatever the previous comment was, in a number of areas, and that our library and other areas are planning to increase their hours gradually as we get back to a more normal situation, and let's hope we don't have a second wave of COVID-19. The bottom of page 99, do we have a time frame as to when we believe this investigation into subcategories across all rateable lands in the Oberon local government area will be completed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is anticipated that once the operational plan is out of the way, we will look at it in the first quarter of the next financial year. So, looking to probably have a report to council by October.
By the meeting in October.
That's the aim, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have to comment on.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doney.
Recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure where in the meeting I would make the appropriate comment, but this is the last report from the directors, though there are other items. Good to see the amount of work that's continued to be done in somewhere that, like the library, under difficult circumstances. But I would just like to make the comment that even though some councillors are not easy to get on with, including myself, I just think the volume of work that is being asked of our staff at the moment is really quite staggering, and I compliment them on the size of the papers for this meeting. It's just something that we need more time to do, let alone they. I just think that through the virus and through our demands and through the workload and through the requirements of other levels of government, I'm really quite impressed and thankful for the quality of the work that that the staff of Little Old Oberon Council get through. I just wanted to make that comment at some point, and I'll make it there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure all councillors would agree with that sentiment. Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation. All in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 105, item 1405, statement of investments. The recommendation is there that council receive the reports for information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Doney and Councillor McKechnie, thank you. Councillor Doney.
Councillor McKibben and I would love to talk about this, but I notice projections for interest rates. We can expect interest rates to stay extremely low. The only decision that the government has in front of them, that the Melbourne Reserve Bank has in front of them at the moment, is whether to go to negative interest rates, but nobody quite knows how to do that. So Australia is trying to hold back from that situation that many other countries have entered. There is nothing stimulating economic activity around the world at the moment except the printing of money, quantitative easing, whatever you want to call it. And that money is obviously being distributed out to through the banks to people who can afford to borrow. This has three main effects. Asset prices will continue to boom. The stock market continues to rise against all common sense whatsoever. House prices will continue to rise, certainly at the upper end, through no common sense whatsoever. And those who can afford to borrow will accumulate assets, and those who can't afford to borrow will move further down the chain. This is related to the interest we earn on our investments, but we live in very strange economic times to think that really the only thing driving economic activity in the Western world at the moment are printing presses pushing out money for people to spend, and the inevitable result of that is just the rise in assets. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKechnie.
No, nothing to add, Madam Mayor. I think we've covered investments fairly thoroughly already this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments, councillors? Put the recommendation, all in favour? Carried, thank you. Page 108, item 1406, grants monthly update. The recommendation is there that report is received as information. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor McKibben, and a seconder, Councillor Capel. Thank you. Councillor McKibben.
Yes, a very thorough report. Note the results of grants and those that we haven't been successful. I was interested in the local roads and community infrastructure program and the 584,514. Obviously, this will assist us in some areas. I'm just not quite sure of completely the guidelines, which have to be obviously released. And obviously, we can't draw up a short list of activities to undertake under this program until we have those guidelines. Do we have any idea when they're going to be released? That's the top of page 109.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard a thing about that, except that they are imminent to be released. I don't know whether the General Manager may have heard anything. No.
Noting that funds are able to be accessed from the 1st of July 2020, one would think that the guidelines would have to come out fairly quickly.
One would think.
You know.
Other comments?
Right, no, I think the rest is self-explanatory, and yes, we move on. I mean, obviously we've had the O'Connell Recreation Ground grant, which was great. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Capel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Nothing further to add, except to say that it's good. I thought that the funding of some of these things might close down a little bit after what we've been through over the last nearly 6 months now. But they're still getting money back out into the regions. So whatever that continues, good on them.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on this one, councillors? I'll put the recommendation, all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 112, item 1407, water usage drought assistance. The recommendation is there that item 1407 be received and noted. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Kellam, thank you. Councillor McKibben. Councillor Kellam.
Yeah, pleasing to see that the usage of the standpipe is decreasing as people are recovering from the drought.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKibben.
Yes, I'd concur with Councillor Kellam's comment. I'm pleased to second the report.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? I'll put the recommendation, all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 114, item 1408, water and sewer plant report. The recommendation is that the report is received as information. A mover, please, councillors. Councillor Gibbons and Councillor Kellam. Thank you. Councillor Gibbons.
Yes, fairly straightforward.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Kellam.
Nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments on this one, councillors? Put the recommendation, all in favour. Carried, thank you. Page 116, item 1409, legal and consultancy fees. The recommendation is that the report item is received as information. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Doney. A seconder, please. Councillor McKibben. Thank you. Councillor Doney.
Madam Mayor, I wish to move an amendment. I don't want to be the first one. I wish to move an amendment to this recommendation.
What, you want to move an amendment to its report for information?
Correct. I would like the discussion of this report moved to confidential.
Right. Okay.
And the reasons I would like it moved to confidential relating to section 10A2 of the Local Government Act may be number A, or letter A, personal matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors.
Yep.
Possibly C, may confer commercial advantage. I'm not sure about that because I'm not sure of all the details. E and G, because if there are personnel issues here, then there may be legal implications that come up in any discussion, and therefore they should not be in the public arena. The reasons I would like to move it into confidential is that in the workforce management plan that we've looked at, there are a number of objectives and goals where the health of the workforce is a responsibility of both the General Manager and the Council. And a number of the legal costs in here of such a size that I would like a little bit more discussion, and possibly some of the planning costs as well, as to how we have incurred that level of costs.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Is there a seconder? Councillor McKibben, thank you. I'll put it to the meeting. All in favour? Against? Councillor McCarthy is against. Thank you. Motion's carried. That item 1409 be carried across into confidential.
Could I just ask you, Madam Mayor?
Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were voting, Councillor.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, the relevance to what happened. That's my concern. I'm not against Councillor Doney going into confidential, but I think, say, on an item, lease and subdivision, it should be itemised what it was for. And I don't think that has to go into confidential. There must be some relevance to seeking that advice, that was all.
Well, I think that Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Doney did outline his concerns of questions he wants to ask that he can't, maybe not ask in open council.
I realise that, but I'm saying that, all right, you take EMM Consulting, expert planning advice. We don't know what it was for. Now, is it for the one in the 6-foot walking track, or is it for O'Connell Road, or whatever? There should be some reference to what it's for.
I'll take that on notice, Councillor McCarthy, but the resolution has been moved and was successful to move it into confidential, so that's what will happen. We're now on page 117, councillors, item 15, and there is no urgent business this evening. Page 117, item 16, closed session confidential reports. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation 2005, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10A(2) of the Act and should be dealt with in part of the meeting closed to the media and the public. I'd like to thank the members of the public for joining this evening's Zoom meeting. I now call for a councillor to move council into closed session. Is there a mover, please? Councillor Doney. A seconder, please. Councillor Capel. All in favour? Carried, thank you. I now request that the Minute Secretary turn off the recording at 9:10:38. And council has resumed at 9:38. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Are we back online? The following resolutions were made in closed session where there were no members of the public present at the time. Item 1409, that council report item 1409 is received as information. Item 1601, that council nominate the open tendering method as prescribed in accordance with clause 166 bracket A of the Local Government Regulation 2005 for the management of the Oberon Pool and Fitness Centre. Item 1602, that council do not write off excess water for assessment 12370502, but instead offer a payment plan arrangement for full cost recovery. I declare the meeting closed at 9:40. The next ordinary.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Sorry, you'll need to also resolve 1409.
I did that first.
Apologies, I missed it.
Councillor McCarthy.
Madam Mayor, the statement of 1409, that'll be out in the general public, won't it? Because it was only the discussion to get what the detail of it was in confidential, wasn't it? Because this is already out there in the business paper, isn't it?
That item 1409 will be received as information. That was
Yes.
the original recommendation, and it's quite clear on page 116 what that recommendation concerned.
Yes.
I think that's quite clear.
So all these items that are mentioned and the figures will be available for the general public, won't they?
Well, they will, because they're in the business paper. Yeah,
Yes.
they will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I've declared the meeting closed. The next ordinary meeting of Oberon Council will be held on Tuesday, July 21st, 2020, commencing at 5:30 p.m. Thank you very much, councillors.
Good night, everybody.